Good evening. Name's Rich Pierce. I've been a Maplewood resident since 1984. Before that, a resident of Richmond Heights since 1957. I am an MRH class of 75. In fact, my mother taught for the district. The reason I decided to attend this meeting is to address my concerns over the district's draft resolution to not only admit illegal alien children into the school district, but to shield their identities from law enforcement seeking to locate and identify trafficked children within the United States in an effort to return them to their parents and country of origin. It is estimated that within the last 4 years, more than 300,000 children crossed the southern border into the U.S. and were unaccounted for. While I support providing education to U.S. citizens residing within Maplewood and Richmond Heights, which are paid for by my tax dollars, illegal immigrants are not entitled to free education, contrary to the first sentence of your resolution, which states, quote, "Whereas it is the right of every child, regardless of immigration status, to access a free public K through 12 education, and the district welcomes and supports all students," unquote. I feel it's my duty to inform the Board of Education of the potential risks associated with your proposal that may not have been considered or that you may not be aware of. Title 8, USC 1324A from the U.S. Department of Justice states, harboring, knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection such alien in any place, including any building or any means of transportation. The penalties include up to 10 years imprisonment. Should the district be receiving financial compensation for the implementation of this resolution, Executive Order 13818, pertaining to misappropriation of state funds, could apply. I do not believe it is in the best interest of the district or the community to pursue this course of action without giving further consideration to the legal implications prior to approval of this resolution. Thank you.
Just for the record, there actually isn't any plans to move forward with any resolution, but I appreciate your comments.
Yes, and all I was going on was what I've heard in the news and I saw on your website.
No, I appreciate it.
So I just wanted to make sure, and if you'd like, I'd be happy to leave the supporting docs with you, if you'd like. I just want to, I just thought it was important that that the district understands what's going on there, because I know there's a lot of sanctuary cities and such that are pursuing this route, and it may not end well, from what I understand. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
All in favor?
No, I'd like to, discussion, I assume first, but I'd like to ask a few questions about the construction advisee selection and the St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative. So I'd like to amend the motion to remove those two items from consent agenda.
Okay, I'm sorry, which items?
Item number 5 and number 7, construction advisee selection, and number 7, the St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative.
I'd like to remove the item number 4, fiscal year 26 support staff salary schedule, for some questions.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, all in favor?
Of the amended
Oh, I'm sorry,
agenda?
Can I get a second for the amendment? Do I need a second for the motion? I don't even know.
Yes.
Well,
second.
Okay, great. All right.
Brian, do you want to move to amend it? Is that-
He did. That's what I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then you had a second.
I can second it.
I mean, by definition, a consent agenda has to have all consent.
Wait, I just want to make sure Linda's got all of them. So,
Brian was 5. Yes.
and then,
Katie and Trent was 4. Yes.
then vote.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None? Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna move on to study items. The district awards by MRH.
Good evening. So each year in about February, I ask MRH staffers as well as our special school district friends to nominate individuals and families and groups in the 4 categories which you have in front of you on the agenda. Nominees for Spirit of MRH and Advocate of the Year are necessarily MRH or SSD employees. Citizen of the Year and Family of the Year are, of course, open to anyone in our wider community. The narratives which I submitted to you are entirely unedited. If at any point during the selection process you have a question about a nominee's position or their roles or their duties, we have several people in the room tonight who are capable of providing any context that you need. You have an unenviable task before you this evening, but please remember the distinguished awards are part of the larger employee recognition process, which is yours. It's your gift to the staff, and as such, you get to make the rules. For example, last year, the Maplewood Fire Department received multiple nominations, and we didn't seem to have an award category that quite fit that nomination. So this board made up a new category on the spot, which is great. It was called the Above and Beyond Award. So if you become stuck at any point in the process, keep this option in mind. There is no expressed prohibition on any person or group receiving an award which they've received in the past, but you might want to consider spreading the love, as it were. That's why I linked a past honorees document on the agenda, and I also have hard copies with me tonight if it would help to have that next to you. That's what I have. Thank you, and good luck. Any questions?
All right, thanks. So, next we have more study items.
We actually
Oh, we have to
discuss
talk about it
here,
now?
and yes, because
Oh,
we
jeez.
have to make action, it's an action item this evening as well.
Oh, okay, well, I actually have to recuse myself from the family portion of
Oh,
it.
okay.
'Cause,
Well, I know several of our board members are new to this process, so as Ed has articulated it, it's always really exciting to see the internal kudos that various staff members are providing to each other. I actually ran into somebody last night and said, "Do you know that you were nominated? You should take a look and see, the lovely things that someone said about you." So I do just really appreciate everybody who took the time to nominate. And then also, obviously, we have many folks listed here. I will say, typically we go category by category. And as Ed has pointed out, it is our award. So, I think kind of off the bat, the very first category, Advocate of the Year, which is actually supposed to be limited to an MRH employee. We may take the folks who are nominated that are outside of the district and move them to a different category for consideration if we so choose, or, whatever. So this is, again, always a lot of good options and a difficult choice here. So typically, folks can just speak up. We can go one by one through, start with Advocate of the Year, if anybody wanted to particularly surface anyone who is named here. And I would certainly encourage anybody who's watching the meeting from home, this is an attachment worth opening and reading for hearing a little bit more about the specific work of some individuals in the district.
So we're not ready to make motions, we just want to discuss.
We
possibly.
typically discuss and come to some general sense of probably we know who will
Okay.
make
Sure.
actions around later, so yes.
So on the point about the employees for Advocate of the Year, this organization, Welcome Neighbor, of course, it mentions 2 names. Are those individuals employees? I mean, they, looks like they do a fair bit of work in support of employees. I didn't know if those individuals.
Lindsay Spencer and Rock Erickson, Dr. Dietrich is shaking his head no, and I know he works specifically with Welcome Neighbor.
So maybe consider for another category.
We could, yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. And Mary Hartnett was nominated in a couple categories.
Correct. And
Certainly worthy, I think, of one of them, and so I certainly would be happy to, obviously a number of people felt that she was a good candidate in some place.
yes, yes.
So I would encourage consideration of her in one of the categories.
Yeah, Dr. Hartnett was nominated in both Advocate of the Year and Spirit, maybe?
Spirit,
Yeah.
yes.
Great. Yeah. I was also struck by the nomination of Tina Franklin, who's an SSD teacher at the elementary school. Some very specific bullet points about her advocacy for the students that she works with in that building.
And this particular category is focused on students, like preparing and inspiring students.
Correct, yeah. If there's nothing more to say there, that's okay. We can cogitate on it during the meeting. Yeah? Yeah. Rock, paper, scissors for it later. All right, Spirit of MRH, I do have to just say before we get into this, this is like the big deal award the whole time that I've been on the board, and I think even before that. This is, I think, something that the whole staff really, has historically seen as a significant, award, and you can see from the list of people who have historically received it to kind of the weight that this carries.
So I noted on this one, I thought it was kind of cool, Mindy McBride, the idea of fellowship Fridays in terms of getting staff together. I thought that was a cool thing to come up with. And then here, to Brian's point with Dr. Hartnett, nominated 3 times in this category, so clearly is inspiring people in the elementary school as well. So I noted, among all the excellent candidates, I thought those were some things I noticed.
And my first one of this one is, of course, Dr. Dietrich, because go way back when Lauren was in school and everything, that's all she was talking about was Dr. Dietrich, and just see him grow within the district and all the love he showed, and he go above and beyond. And of course, Mary Hartnett, my second, but most definitely.
Yeah, I also thought the example for Mindy McBride was pretty interesting, and yeah, really kind of embodies that creating a positive culture piece. But yeah, the number of nominations for Dr. Hartnett is also very compelling.
This is more nominations we had last year. Maybe that was the end. That's probably.
We can move on to Family of the Year, is that all right? Okay.
So I'll speak up for Sandra and Craig Richardson. They have been working tirelessly on Props B&E right now, and I think that for many, many years they've been working with their organization, Keep MRH Strong, and so I think that they're very well deserving of a Family of the Year award.
I would second that too. I know
all the families named here, the McMackins, obviously a very involved family with kids that have graduated now. The Seeley family is nominated multiple times here. The Richesons and the Coriels, I think all really involved families. Yeah, this one is very, very tough. And we can move on to Citizen of the Year, sure. We're all just gonna have to really think about that.
I have a question. So,
Yeah.
first candidate,
Mhm.
Mayhan Springborn. So they come twice a day, every day, and have done so for 5 years. Is that accurate? I mean, that's what it sounds like. To me, it's quite a dedication.
I would like to meet this person. 5 years every day. That's quite a commitment.
John just passed away. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, about 5 days ago. So, but Bayhan's still there.
Um,
Oh, wow.
so I have a question for the Citizen of the Year.
Yeah.
Because I think of Citizen of the Year, I think of an individual. So I see that we got, this credit union here,
Mhm.
Community America Credit Union, who's doing amazing work. Could we get like a separate category that allow, or
Corporate citizen.
Mhm.
something like that, you know?
Mhm.
Spring corporate.
Yeah, no, like to recognize the
Yeah.
contributions they make.
Yeah, because I think they should be recognized, but I feel like when it comes to citizen, I think
Yeah.
individual. So,
Corporate stakeholder of the year.
Yeah, something, community,
community,
organization.
Community
partner,
partner.
of the year, yes.
Very.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, that's another case for welcome neighbor, you know,
Yes.
potentially to be in that category as well. I know, I think welcome neighbor has been a couple of years that the past 3 years, that we've been working with them. I know, the credit union, this is at least 2 years, yeah, that we've been working with them too. So, oof, both good ones.
So stuff to chew on. We can.
Make a decision.
It sounds nice.
Yeah, we'll make it.
So
We're
what
not.
is MBA?
Well, we're not leaving until we make a decision. So.
Yeah,
decision.
so,
I think, just on one point here, there's, on the Citizen of the Year, I mean, it's clear, a couple folks, it's been many years of support, and some it's fewer years, and I think for those that it's fewer years, as we continue to see that involvement, we can recognize them later. I would, I'm gonna lean towards probably one of the folks, of which we have a few there. It's been many years of ongoing support.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the 2026-2027 academic calendar. Does anybody have any questions about the academic calendar? Somebody can present on it.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick overview. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. We have a number of people that participated.
We'd like to thank those, publicly acknowledge and thank those individuals. You will see that they are listed there in no respective order. Our collective bargaining agreement, you will see section 6.1 actually requires that we include members of the executive team or designees. And so some of those individuals are a part of the executive team leadership from the MRH, NEA, or the designee. We also have parents who served and volunteered and gave their time. And then we also have other staff members as well, support staff members. And so it is a large group of stakeholders who weigh in to help shape our calendar, academic calendar for the school year that supports, of course, our students, families, and, of course, our staff.
The timeline, we've gotten better at this over the years. We've used to be up to 5 or 6 meetings, but now we've trimmed it down. We can accomplish this task in 3. So it's like name that tune, but only in a couple meetings. And we bring to you tonight this calendar for consideration, which we affectionately refer to as Draft B. Can we answer any questions for you?
Any questions? No? All right, we're going to move on to item number 3, board policy. What?
Oh, I was just saying thank you.
That's great.
Oh, can I ask a question while we're at it here?
Yep.
It is related to the current act. Was it decided that we need to use a snow day or anything at the end of this academic year for the extra day in March? Or we not doing that?
No, we're still under our allocation for alternative methods of instruction, so we are still within the appropriate number of hours and minutes for our school year.
All right, board policy, ECG, school attorney legal services by Dr. Benita Jamison.
Thank you, Board. So this item, as you're aware, typically when policies are presented to the board, it is because of changes in the law, and we receive a batch of policies through MSBA or at the request of board members. So this particular item is at the request of a board member. I did put some initial suggestions in as it relates to how to address the needs of the board in regards to individual members being able to reach out. So as you can see there, removed as a consequence of the formal board direction, and included that a member of the board is able to reach out to district attorneys. I welcome any questions that you may have at this time.
Do we want to discuss the language that's in here at all?
Well, can you say, Trent, why you were requesting this policy be up for review?
We don't have a contract with our current attorney. I think it's a good time for us to review attorneys. I have had some issues with the way that we have been advised legally, and I proposed that, wait a minute, I'm sorry, now I'm confusing myself, apologize. I reached out to the attorney to ask for some things, and I was basically rebuffed that I was not allowed to seek legal services. And I looked at this policy, and it says that it may take place. What is it, as a consequence of formal board direction. So what it doesn't say is, what does formal board direction mean? Does that mean that the entire board needs to vote on something in order to engage our legal services? Or can it just be a board member that has a legal question, and I would like to change it such that it does? That a board member can ask for some legal help.
Got it. When I was reading the amendment that you had presented, I didn't have that context, but I guess I thought when I read this policy, this is simply the engagement of an attorney, and if we have a district attorney ourselves, then we certainly should have policies and procedures for how the board can reach out to them. Sounds like the concern you're bringing up is with the protocols for how
Yes.
Folks can get, individual board members can get access to our
That's correct.
existing legal counsel.
And I guess I can see where you say that it's on the advice and behalf of the school district, and instead of, so it's a question of what does that sentence mean, on the behalf of the school district? Is that, am I acting in the behalf of the school district, or is it just for contracting services? It doesn't say that either. So I think it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
I was looking for, So the way that this happened was I wanted to contact our attorney. I was trying to look for a policy for how to do that. I went to our board policy manual. I searched legal services and attorney and came to this. And so that's why I wanted to consider looking at this and changing the language such that it was more clear.
Gotcha.
And I think the problem was when you asked the question, you were told only the board president or the vice president can ask. And so I think.
Which is
Which
not
isn't
written
really
any,
anywhere, and then it's confusing, like, well, what if currently Mike and Josh and I just, you know what I mean? So I think it's maybe, and then maybe to your point, I think, Katie, is that this may not be the place to do that. That's fine, but I do think there probably needs to be some clarification around that, around how
Sure.
that works.
Yeah, I will say Assembly makes it really easy to search other districts' policies, and I will say the policy as we have it presented is the same as basically every district in the state that uses Assembly. So, you know, this kind of change to the policy, I just would be nervous to make without maybe talking to MSBA about it or something like that, but I appreciate that this is surfacing more of a relationship sort of management as opposed to.
I think it's sort of, you know, you're a new board member, you're trying to sort of get something done. And the only thing I really have to go by is to go to the policy documents and look up to see, you know, how is a school board member supposed to conduct themselves? Well, I read through this document and sort of came up with what I thought was the best way to go about it. But then I was rebuked.
I mean, not to say that the rebuke was appropriate, because I don't really know the circumstances about it, but the other issue, just in general, is that we are all resources. And if you have a question, you could certainly reach out to one of us. I think that, you know, for the most part, we've been pretty responsive, or will be pretty responsive to actual, you know, to questions that people have. So I guess I would just suggest, you know, that the default for any sort of concern or question should be, hey, how do I do this? And if that doesn't satisfy you, then we can move on. But, I mean, obviously it's up to you, whatever you want to do, but that would just be my suggestion.
Well, I mean, the way that it was being decided was the attorney was deciding how I should interact with
Right.
them, and that just did not seem appropriate to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this issue surfaced prior to our recent retreat.
Yes.
Where I think that we, those of us in attendance, came to an agreement that early in the new tenure of new board members, we will include it as a development item for all of us to review the norms and protocols and get buy-in and perhaps be able to adjust those in a way that makes sense for new board members or new perspectives or new opinions based on a year of service, 2 years of service, et cetera. So I know we're still ironing out some of the relational differences this year, and I am feeling hopeful after that retreat that we have some clarity on moving forward in a way that allows folks to express what's working for them and what is not.
And for those of you watching at home, part of the challenge with the board is that obviously we can't just meet whenever we want to discuss these things. It has to be announced, and so the type of discussions that would normally flow, I guess, organically, you know, with a colleague or whatever, just aren't available in this setting. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to where when we do have shifting persons on the board, they're able to play catch up, because time does not stop when you know, a new board person comes on. It's continuous, and there's a lot of information to kind of catch up on. So anyway, work in progress. And are there any other
I guess I mean, I'm reading it again here. A decision to seek legal counsel or advice on behalf of the district shall normally be made by the superintendent or person specifically authorized by the superintendent. It should also take place as a consequence of formal board direction.
Correct. So, okay, so there's a difference between shall and may, right? So shall means that's always gonna be the policy, that, you know, this is this always will take place at the direction of the superintendent or person specifically authorized. Meaning, a person that if we have a meeting and we all collectively vote that a person is going to take action, that person shall do that. May means that we can have a discussion about whether or not a person should go to, you know, seek legal advice. So, I mean, I really feel like it's maybe not as much of an issue as it appears to be just from this policy. And I think that, as Katie said, this is something that could be clarified through norms about how the board interacts with itself and council. And again, you know, the council, if we want council to respond to whoever talks to, you know what I mean, whoever calls up that is a member of the board, then we could certainly direct council to do that. I mean, that is our prerogative, so.
But it's not gonna be affixed in a policy.
It would be affixed in our norm and in our direction to council.
Yeah, I think I was ambivalent about the policy. I know we're not voting on anything at the moment, but I was ambivalent about whether to change it or not coming into the discussion here. But one of the things that I'm leaning towards now, a bit more openness to the change, is having to do with those intervening times between the meetings, as if there's discussions going on with legal counsel, and we're receiving emails, and obviously we defer primarily to you, Josh, or Jenny, to carry on that correspondence. But if you know, can a board member direct a question to legal counsel? I think it's kind of dealing with those intervening periods of time, and maybe that's better with a protocol rather than a policy. But I do want to leave open the possibility, if it needs to be in policy, that a board member could direct a question in those intervening times.
And I don't
But
see,
as a general
yeah.
rule, yeah, I agree. It should generally be something at formal board direction. We voted on something, and the chair is going to carry out or pass on the questions that have been authorized. That should be the norm. This is kind of like trying to fix the problem of those intervening weeks.
Right, and I think that that's probably something that could be addressed with a protocol. And I don't see it personally. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't. A member should not be able to address a question to council. I mean, that's.
And I think, Katie, I think in looking at this, based on what you said, I see this too now as more of just, this is how we obtain legal services.
Yeah.
I do think that's what this is saying, but I think to Trent's point, you know, it's not in a protocol right now, but the lawyers said I've been directed, so it's this clarity around who's directing, so I do think we need to make it very clear, you know, how we want that to look. I also agree, like, and I think, Trent, you also offered some language in one of your emails that was like a backstop against abuse, right?
Yeah.
You can have in your protocol, like, everyone can, but if someone's misusing or, you know, too much time, then the board can get together and say, hey, rein it in, because there is a cost associated with it. But there are often gonna be times and when you may have a question that is a legal question that will help you understand something that you may need to reach out to legal counsel, and they should be able to do so in the absence of all of us agreeing.
I guess I just don't think that the choice to deny a board member access to legal counsel should be arbitrary or capriciously assigned to just one person or another.
Right, I think we all agree with that. I think we're
Yeah.
in agreement.
So yeah, if we were to change the policy to this revised language, then the protocol needs to be established how this is taking place.
Yeah.
Because I should not be just shooting off questions to legal counsel and generating bills. That's really not appropriate. So.
And I mean, this isn't just, I mean, again, for the public, it's not as if people are
Right.
just like, hey, I'm wondering how this statute works, you know, can you inform me? I mean, usually, and there aren't really that many issues that come up, but occasionally there are issues that do require some analysis. I mean, partly because the way the statutes are written are very confusing, I mean, even for lawyers. So, anyway, yeah, so I don't know how to alleviate your concerns right now, especially since we are
I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to drop it at this point in terms of this policy, but I think that in general, I mean, we probably should have considered this policy plus a protocol and then approve a protocol or something along those lines. But I am concerned that if we just leave it be, that it will never be addressed and we'll be back in the same situation.
And I think we decided our retreat, right? We're gonna do the protocols
Yeah.
in
Right.
May.
Yeah.
Maybe May.
So
At
if
the
you-
work session?
Yeah, if you want to draft up something for May,
Right.
like, that would be helpful.
Because that way it'll be after the election, so if you have new
Yeah, people to be able
participation,
to,
which
right.
makes sense because they will be here.
I would only add that if, you know, depending on how the protocol is drafted, because I've raised other concerns where the protocol doesn't quite match the policy and the policy has the priority. We just have to make sure that if we do have to come back and amend this policy, that we're prepared to do that.
So just for planning purposes for me, moving forward with the May work session to cover the norms and protocols.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns?
No, thank you for considering it.
So this doesn't need to be included in the board policy batch
Correct.
modifications. We can remove that from action items. Okay.
It wasn't in it.
Oh, it wasn't included with it?
No,
Oh,
if
I
we
thought-
changed the
I thought it-
language, we might have moved it.
It's the board batch from last month.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, there was a number of them, so I thought that was one of them, okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to item number 4, legal services, RFQ, Dr. Jameson.
I mean, this isn't really Dr. Jameson's item, this is
So
other
I
people's.
think maybe, like, I know you gave us this document a while ago, and I just didn't have a chance to go through it, so I'm thinking that this may be one that I don't know if perhaps it'd be helpful, to have a smaller group, like, work together to maybe make modifications and present it, work with Dr. Jameson, sort of modify it, and then bring it back to the board.
That is what I'd like to see. It's a very long document. I'd like to see it trimmed down, or at least more of a proposal and then appendices that you could, dive into or not. I would like to see a smaller group work on it and then maybe present something to the full board for consideration at a later date, probably a special meeting, because I'd like to get this going soon.
And I think most of my comments were just, I think there were sometimes like the same concept, but like in a lot of different sections, a little differently, so it was a little confusing, so like how we could streamline it a little better, so it's like a little more concise.
The only district I could find that in their policy specifically talked about the frequency of their going out for, proposals for their legal counsel was Kirkwood, and their policy just has a line added that they must go out at least every 5 years for a new counsel. I don't know, did this draft come from somewhere specific?
They are. So most of the school districts use the same RFQ. So this is the one that's used by Hancock Place, by Ladue, and also Kirkwood.
Okay.
And I incorporated some of the feedback that was sent by Trent as a means to include those items as well. So if additional, I can go back and look at the feedback that Jenny
I think I
sent.
just had some questions that maybe we could just work.
Yeah, Jenny sent a red line version.
Yeah, or just earlier today, though. Wasn't enough time for anyone to
I-
write.
It's, it should be known, MSBA also has a list of attorneys that they recommend to school districts, and if we're gonna send this RFQ to firms on that list, I would recommend we don't need attachment 2 and maybe not even attachment 3, because it just seems like an onerous RFQ to complete so many
So we
things
use
here.
Lawyers Media, and we've been using them, and they actually distribute all of them directly to the law firms. And then I did elicit responses from the St. Louis County school districts to identify which school districts that are primarily used. So I do have a list of those attorneys as well. And once it is completed, they will get direct communication in regards to the RFQ. So it will be sent out multiple places, also posted on the website as well.
I mean, I don't think that you should really worry about the length of it. I mean, the law firms are gonna want the business, they don't care, they're gonna.
Okay, so
they're
this
gonna
is
fill it out.
a normal length. This seems
It
Oh,
is.
Yeah,
seems unusual.
I mean, you should see like conflict lists, things like that. I
Okay.
mean, it's,
And it-
Well,
yeah.
if MSBA has already vetted them to a certain extent,
Well, they would still have to, perform their own internal conflicts and things like that.
So do we need to edit this or are we just gonna leave it as is?
So I do have, I pulled up Jenny's, here we go. And she did make some suggestions, so I was hoping that, based on the timeline and the ask, is to solidify any changes so that we can get it posted and have enough time to actually get this out the door. So these are the suggestions that Jenny made, so I didn't know if we wanted to go page by page for those suggestions.
I mean, so this, again, is making me a little uncomfortable because I think we're veering into like doing not the governance of the district, but, getting into the specifics. I don't think that's like a great use of this time. I would be okay with Jenny's recommendation to dub a few people to work with you outside of this space, but ultimately, like, the staff issue the RFPs, and we vote on the selection, so.
And if we want to do it promptly, my thought was, because I'm happy to work in the next few days on it, and then we don't have a work session next Thursday, is that correct?
I do not.
If people are still available, just jump on a quick call if we want to approve it, if we want to do it rapidly, quickly. I mean, that is fine with me. I just,
Do we typically approve RFQs before they go out the door? We typically approve them after they've been, come
we
back.
have to approve the final form as a group.
I don't
City
We
Council.
have one that actually is on, that was in consent.
Like, we're asking for the service, we ask for the services, and then the staff handle the,
Right,
the,
but we had to
going
approve the
out.
final document because it's a contract. So that's the only thing, if we modify it from this.
Yeah, so typically, if approval is to be given, it is a approval to seek and submit the RFQs. If we're seeking legal services, the board would direct us then to create the RFQ, disseminate it with the rules that we are beholden to, and then we would score those with a rubric that we developed internally, and then we would present to you the scores and our recommendation. And then it would then be the board's decision as to whether they went with our recommendation or their own.
Well, so we already have asked for the creation of this document to submit an RFQ for legal services. That's already happened, that's why this is in front of us.
Correct.
So, do we need to approve this document or not?
There's no
No,
approval
but-
necessary.
But if
No.
you guys wanna tweak it,
It's just a clean,
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
clean.
Yeah,
Nothing was really too substantive, other than that perhaps the term, 4 years seemed a little, I was thinking 3-year terms, but, you can.
There's almost sort of a preliminary contract language in here, which I'm not sure if that's necessary. Evaluation criteria, definitely.
Well, we can talk,
Yeah, all right.
We can, case it, I think, but probably not
Good use of time, I agree.
perfect, thank you.
All right, so we're gonna move over to,
do we need to add any of of the things that were moved out of consent, I don't know if there was like discussion that people
Oh, right.
needed for things.
Yeah.
Can we-
Do they move to action
I mean,
items,
I think we can put them wherever some of them, yes. Well, they'll all have to be action items, yes, but I don't know if discussion.
The two that I requested, one I have a very quick question on. If you want to move to that, I'm happy to.
It feels more, I don't know,
Proper place for
cohesive to
Okay.
talk about them here. I don't know.
So, the St. Louis, for those who are keeping the minutes, this is gonna be, St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative.
Number 7.
It
From
was
the
number
consent
7, right, so
agenda.
now it'll become,
Study
now
number
it'll
5.
become
So
study
you're
item
number
number 5. My question is, this is a short one, I think, this plan, or this proposal, asks that we contribute some employees to a monthly research team meeting, and I'm a little unclear about whether this is obligatory on our part, is a suggestion, is it volunteers, and is there compensation for those that choose to participate or are appointed to participate? So it's kind of that was the question.
No, that's a great question. They pay them, and there's an application process for that. And so we're in the stage currently where they are beginning to interview those individuals because the compensation is pretty hefty. And their role is to help with our cultural work. So currently, Annie Rothenberg and Dr. Ambrose Phillips are part of our smaller meetings that we meet with them about, and they will begin to start doing some focus groups and some other things. And at the end of that, there is a portion of money given to us to actually implement to support our culture and climate efforts. So one of the things that they're doing now, I'm in the process of my post checks in buildings. And Sarah Chung, who is one of the direct individuals with whom we work, she comes in, she actually collects the notes, and then she does models for us to give us an idea of where our strengths are, and then also gives a detail of where next logical next steps would be. And that information is then shared with the NEA as we do planning around our culture and climate endeavors. So the obligation is there. They are clear in regards to what those requirements are. It's included in the application that they've completed, and they are assigned solely to our district to support our efforts.
Okay, so I think maybe we're talking about the same thing. I just want to make sure. So on the memorandum of understanding, this is on page 4, 6A, the obligations of MRH, selection and assignment of staff to represent MRH on the research team, participation in monthly meetings. Is that what you're talking about? So
Yes.
people have applied
Yes.
to be assigned to that research team?
Correct.
And there's this compensation group.
And
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The construction advisee, is that?
Yeah,
another question?
okay, that was the other one. So this one was an interesting one because we list here, so this is item 5 in the consent agenda. Now it's 3.6. Yeah, so in the consent agenda for the construction advisee selection, it identifies a policy FEB, selection of architectural, engineering, and land surveying services. According to that policy statement, which I've just pulled up again here, it says the board will select qualified firms, negotiate contracts, et cetera, right, where such services are required. Selection shall be made on the basis of demonstrated competence and qualifications. Okay. Then it says the district will solicit statements of quality and performance data from firms, plural, when a project requiring such services is proposed, and then that data will be evaluated on the basis of these multiple criteria. There's 4 criteria given. So I guess, can we get a list of all the firms that were solicited in this RFP and the data that was collected in accordance with those 4 criteria? All I would say is, and maybe we still need to collect that, but I guess Mike's up at the podium to address, so okay, there you go.
I mean, I can share it. We had 4 companies, so we put out an RFQ, RFP, request for proposals. We had 4. They were Cobalt, Avison Young, Navigate, and Wachter. They were scored by 3 different, so score 1, scores 2, score 3. Those were all scored. 2 at that point were taken out of the running. We moved forward with 2. Those 2 were Navigate and Cobalt. From there, we did interviews. Those interviews were completed by myself and another district employee. Those interviews were completed. They were interviewed based on past experience with MRH, project understanding and approach, staffing expertise, conflict of interest, similar project experience, and then also if they are located in the school district, female or minority owned. And at which point, after all of this process, it came down to Navigate. So there was a selection process, there was an RFP. We do have a policy. I think the policy that was connected might have been the wrong policy because we actually have one for construction manager, not for. We actually have a policy specifically for construction manager, not for architect.
FEC is linked there also, maybe construction management services.
The reason why the architect one was probably on, or why it is on there, is because whoever the construction advisor is, they will actually help us choose an architect firm as we move forward if there is a need for architecture needs moving forward, our design projects.
So I guess there's another policy, so I'm just taking a quick look at it now. Go ahead, Jen.
Mine is just the cost, so I'm a little, okay, so I see there's explained there's a cap, a monthly cap, but, I guess my question is twofold, so what do we anticipate, I know we don't anticipate like a lot of like serious construction, right? So my question is sort of, what service are we looking for from that generally, and can we just at least ballpark an idea of like how much we think that might cost?
Yeah, so what we're doing now, and actually we have Ray Hutzel from Navigate that's here tonight too, if we have any specific questions for them. But what we're looking at now, I'm meeting with them, is what are the projects that we can handle in-house, right? So what have I been hired for from the district that I feel I can handle in-house? What are those projects that I have expertise to handle, right? What are projects or planning and procedures and protocols that I've never done before, that I'm going to need the expertise from Navigate of, I've never made a 20-year facilities plan. Okay, Navigate has done that, right? So when we look at the facility evaluation later from CCA, Navigate has done this, I don't want to exaggerate, but 100 times, looked at districts and said, they've taken these facility evaluations and they've built these out, right? So we would use them for something like that. We would use them for something that, bond issue passes and we're building a seed to table classroom at the elementary school, right? They're experts in building out a calendar.
It'd still be limited more to like construction type services and then long range.
Correct. Right. So that plan that we see is 14,500 that's in there. That is, if I handed them tomorrow, bond goes through and I hand them everything and say, here it is, that's kind of what we're looking at. We had a cap on the project at the high school. We didn't hit that cap one time. So I would say they're very responsive to the district. And, I specifically asked for Ray to be on this project. Ray was scheduled to retire. And that was one of my things that I said to Navigate was, hey, it's going to play really well for you if you don't let him retire. So we're thankful that Ray chose to lean out of retirement for another couple months or a year for us.
So would Navigate help us with selection of bids? So they would do the bid review process and?
They're experts in it, yeah. So when we're looking at, when we were at the board committee meeting and we were looking at, what is repair cost, what is replacement cost, it's amazing when I call them and say, the other day I forget what it was, I said, scoreboard. I was like, hey, by chance, do you guys have records on what are other districts charging for sponsorships on scoreboards? Okay, and then what are the costs for scoreboards? They have a plethora, and Corey, another gentleman that works there, was like, oh yeah, let me look that up, I'll send it right over to you. And they have a database of all of these things, and it's constantly updating. So they don't have to go out to bidders and say, hey, what is this gonna cost? They already have a database. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay.
Well, just maybe to follow, what is your estimate of sort of the top end of the cost?
Yeah, so that was in board, was it 14,500 is the per month? But again, like I think on the high school project, which was, in my opinion, much more intensive and much more involved, and I think it was 13.5, and that was, you were pretty much here 1 to 2 days a week. I would be shocked if we hit that number many times. I think initially, we're in the initial planning phases, we're going to hit that number. But as we move forward and through the project, and we're just piecing things together and saying, okay, Navigate's going to help with this, but Mike can do this. Okay, we're going to hit it sometimes, but not very often. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, come on up, Ray. They like people that use the microphone.
The 14.5 is a cap. We'll do it time and material up to that amount. It's a really good deal, because if we don't spend the hours and we're under 14.5, then you get billed the less amount. But it's capped, but we'll still do whatever it takes. That's what Navigate does, whatever it takes. And on the first job, we came in late. We came in after the fact. There was a huge learning curve that it took, that we had to spend the time, and we did, to get to it. And you only saw our construction services on that project. This one, we also have in that the pre-construction services, and will be, as Mike said, helping with, one item is helping with the RFQ, the selection of your architect and engineer. We'll be working with them once they're on board to prepare the plans, review the plans, and working on estimates. We'll do a planning schedule for which we use to navigate through the whole project, not just construction, but from start to finish. In fact, it's already drafted. We haven't even started yet, but I've already drafted it, because we're very excited to have this opportunity, and I'm excited to be back, and I can't wait to get started. But specifically, the question was picking general contractors. Yes, there may be one, there may be 5, there may be 10. It depends on what makes sense for the project, for the school, the type of project, the location, and what happens. That's also a reason why we gave you a cap, because if it's one contractor, it takes less time. If it's 3 or 4, it takes more. But we'll do what we'll manage them for help. We're an extension of your staff. We work for Mike. And that's another thing about the cap. When we finished the first phase, we went to the same arrangement. I was talking with Mike every week, well, what do you need me to do? I only did what he asked me to do, and that's why we were able to keep the costs down. And we have 2 pages of things we'll do for you. It's in the task order, and I could read through them with you today, but you'll see it later anyway. But yeah, our services will be through start to finish, design, construction, and post-construction. So just want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about what Navigate does and how.
Yeah, it sounds like excellent services, and it would be helpful to the district. I mean, obviously, I'm just concerned about the cost that's added in, that we're essentially like hiring another employee, like you say, an extension, another group of people for the district, when we're already dealing with the need to trim expenses rather than add expenses. I think if the bond passes, then I'd be much more open to the services.
Yeah.
Contingent, yeah. But that's yeah. So but my thing is, I'd be more open to it, right? But I'm not necessarily, I'm still concerned about the ongoing expenses
Yeah,
and
Brian,
the open-endedness.
so I would say this, that one is, it's contingent upon the bond passing. Two, based on the high school numbers, if you just look at the data we collected on the job, and I wish I had it in front of me, they saved us more money in change orders than what we paid them. And I think it was, total like fees we paid, I don't want to throw numbers out, but it was in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Pay for good expertise, you can actually save money in the long run. So I'm certainly sympathetic.
Yeah.
It just sounds like another cost.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, do we not have internally the expertise to do it?
Just not about everything.
Yeah, right, not about everything, yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any other?
The other one I pulled out was the fiscal year 26 support staff salary schedule. I would like to approve this. I would like to approve it, though, in the context of budgeting. I just feel like this is a little premature to be voting on until we really have looked at how this interplays with the recent collective bargaining agreement and all the other expenses that we have. So I would move to table this to a later date for consideration later.
I think the concern with that is the same thing that came up with the collective bargaining agreement, right? The longer we hold off giving folks certainty about what their salary is next year, the more likely it is for them to leave.
Well, then I sort of have to ask the question, well, then why are we looking at this at the very last minute?
So I would say, Trent, that all of the projections that have been put in front of the board, I think this came through as a question last night and was responded to this morning around lunchtime, I believe. But all of the projections you've seen have this number baked in. The 3.75% increase to the base plus the 2.75% step is built into all of the projections that have been placed in front of the board for review. And to the timeline question, this is the season when these things typically come before the board for approval. Had we not modified the schedule, there would be no board approval required. However, when we did the ranging, when we established the salary schedule 2 years ago, we did find that, like our teachers are currently, that our support staff was woefully behind as they relate, their salaries relate to the rest of the county. And unlike teachers, we did range against all of St. Louis County, so more districts. So when we created that schedule, we did so by setting our starting rates for each position as an average of the third quartile and the top. So that would give us some breathing room so that we wouldn't need a new schedule every year, because it's a lot of work. And it's rather disruptive and complicated process. So when I rearranged against the county again, we did realize that we slipped a little, and this 3.75 brings us back up into that range where we are competitive again.
So what, you're saying it leaves us in the middle somewhere? Or?
Yeah, so right now, even with this 3.75% increase, this gets the positions above median or within that third quartile. Yeah.
Because I thought we discussed like a month or two ago, for those positions, we were in the top quartile, but you're saying other people adjusted.
Yes.
And so because of that.
Exactly.
We've slipped.
And it always seems like we're chasing.
Right. Yeah. And then it had also been mentioned that this was part of a planned 2-year increase, like
No.
I was confused by the way it was
Okay, so
described, and then.
the teacher salary schedule was a 2-year agreement as a result of the work of the Compensation Benefits Task Force. Last year was the first year of our CBA, and to honor the work that the CBTF did on the salary schedules, they did not negotiate salaries. So last year, well, it's this current year, fiscal 25 completes the 2-year cycle for the teacher salary schedule increases. The support staff schedule went live 2 years ago. So this is the second year of the use of the schedule, but of the schedule. There were no increases to the base. The only movement support staff received this year was the 2.75% step as they moved through the schedule. So I apologize if some of that language was unclear.
No,
But
okay, so this, the bottom line is this would put support staff
yes,
back in the top half.
in the top, in most cases, in that top third. Thereabouts. and instead of, a few years ago, I stopped using the word median because median just wasn't quite good enough anymore, and we started leaning towards that term of competitive. And I do feel that as far as the starting rates, this schedule does represent a competitive offer for our valued support staff.
And financial impact in the note, is that just strictly salary or is that salary and benefits?
Let's see.
192.
That's just, I believe that is just the salary, yes. And we have modified, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we go through more budget presentations, but there are some positions that are on the books that we have removed for the next year on the support staff side. But, and there may be more coming, there might be other recommendations. We're a little bit early in that process. So the number did fluctuate downward, actually, from where some of these were in the earliest projections that I shared with the board.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. So I think we're done with study items. Moving on to admin communications, the legislative update by Dr. Benita Jameson. All good news, right?
One would hope so. So, as everyone is aware, there have been a lot of recent changes, both at the federal level and some also at the local level, primarily through executive orders, and being that it's budget season, and also with our current prompts, I thought it was beneficial to give the board an update of where we are and what the potential impact could be. So I'm not going to read this slide, and I think when we initially received the first executive order and we were notified, we had about $380,000 that was frozen, and we were beginning to think about where will we find the money. So that was then rescinded, released, and we were able to utilize those funds. But in essence, executive orders do not create new or amend existing laws. They're really more directive in nature, where the president can actually tell how one expects to get that done. And in order for any changes in regards to laws to be made, it needs to be done through the Congress.
Traditionally.
Yes, traditionally. Supposed to, correct. So I'm not going to go through all of these. You see the ones that are listed here, but I am going to pull out a couple that could potentially impact the district. One is school choice. You may have heard it through House bills as open enrollment. This one is concerning for me because it allows the ability from the open enrollment standpoint at the state level, where the district could lose approximately 5% of our students. And there are a lot of pieces that are still unclear in regards to input-output of the funds for that. So whether or not we will be paying the rate for a Ladue or Clayton, or if we would be using the funds that the state actually provided. So going through the calculations with our current enrollment for K-12 students with 1,393 students, that could be 70 students we can lose in the district. Now, I am using the number 70. That could be plus or minus, depending on who chooses to leave. We will have the opportunity to bring additional students in, but if we are unable to bring those students in and we were able to lose 70 students, we're looking at a $421,000 impact to our current budget. Just to give some additional context, House Bill 11 was just voted out of the House and is now being considered, and I don't know if additional changes will be made. There are other items here that are listed, and you can see them there, that could potentially have impact, because a lot of our resolutions and also some of our policies have references to support of our transgender students or students who identify as LGBTQIA, as well as our efforts around equity. So here, there could be the potential of loss of revenue, and Charlotte, Mecklenburg in South Carolina, I believe, is recently a district that actually was sanctioned for a loss in funding. And on March 20th, the federal government actually created an executive order to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. What I will say, I do serve on the Commissioner's Advisory Board. There has not been any indication of what that impact will be for us at the state level. So just to give you an idea of, and feel free to jump in if you have questions before I go further. But so for the first 100 days of the current administration, these are some of the things that are being discussed. And so what's been told for superintendents is that we can anticipate approximately a 25% decrease in our Title I funds. But as you can see reflected here, the district also receives Title II and Title III funds. We could also see a loss there. There are other items that are not listed here, which I will pick up on the next slide to say what's at stake in general. So E-rate, the district currently receives E-rate funding, and so there is a current look at reducing that funding. Our E-rate funding is a 50-50 allocation. We also can lose funding for Medicaid, IDEA. Is not seeing any increases, but school meals is the one that I'm highly concerned about. So a threshold is typically set in regards to what families have to present to show or verify their current income. Right now, the threshold is being considered to be increased to 60%. That could eventually impact a number of families in our district who receive subsidies for free and reduced lunch. And keep in mind, the district still feeds our students, and we do run a deficit each year based on that. So that is an additional impact there as well. So what does it look like for us? So at a 50% rate, tentatively for MRH, we would lose $40,000 for E-rate, Medicaid. You see the number there. School meals is the one that's concerning for me. We're talking about $320,000. Title I would be $55,000, and based on the numbers that we ran preliminarily, if open enrollment passes, we potentially could be upwards of losing $471,000 for that. So without the money for open enrollment included, that's not there. But there are also some other unfunded and unintended costs that are not included here. So for example, there's a current House bill in regards to adding additional AED machines in schools, and you have to have an AED machine that is accessible within a 3-minute window, meaning 1.5 minutes to get there, another 1.5 minutes to get back, and those machines run about $1,200. We do currently have AED machines in our buildings, but we would have to increase the AEDs in each of our buildings to meet this particular item if it is approved. Yes, thank you. Yes. So I just wanted to give an update to give the board a high-level overview of what we're considering as we think about assumptions and as we're going into budget season. So Chris and I are meeting to discuss where do we need to pull back money, but these are some current realities that we do want to consider, particularly where we have our 2 propositions and the work that we need to continue to do for staff and students. This concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions you may have.
I have a question, and I'm not sure exactly what the interplay with special school district is and us, but I think one of the biggest dangers of obviously cutting the Department of Education is they really oversee some of the most vulnerable students in our population, making sure that IEPs are in place. I mean, I don't think that we necessarily have to worry about enforcement. I am just concerned about funding, though, for how that works.
So I have Emily Kreisman come up. We literally just had this conversation because there are other factors that are not being considered. So if you just want to speak to a little bit of what we talked about and other information.
Yeah, some of the pieces that are still unknowns, but are certainly topics of conversation are what is that going to look like in terms of the administration of services and supports for students that do qualify in the state of Missouri, and what protocols might we need to put in place as the folks that are in charge of those services and rendering them, and Chris and I just had a sidebar conversation too about what that means from our partnership, from the financial aspects that we have as we continue to partner across St. Louis County and students that may come to us or leave us to other spaces to receive their services.
Which doesn't include transportation costs, so I do want to add that in.
Yeah.
So, there.
Well, and I have to imagine too, things like school meals, if that's based on now, I mean, I think you're gonna have a lot more families who are hurting. And as time goes on, that cost, since we don't charge, would increase.
Well, the cost is gonna go up anyway with the cost of everything.
Food,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I
exactly.
think the number of people who will be having hardship
Oh, yeah.
according
Well, yeah.
to pay for school lunch will also increase.
One other dynamic that is related to that is the changing of that threshold on who is and who is not eligible. Beyond that, it's the validation or verification of those families that submit and receive those services. So right now, we're required by federal law, USDA regulation, to go through a verification every year, and we have our cafeteria management system randomly generates families, and we send notification. It's a process that starts in October and doesn't complete until December, so it's a long, drawn-out process. And it's quite difficult to get that back because it does require families to submit financial information in the form of W-2s and other things to verify that they are who they say they are and that they're earning what they say they are earning, and those that live in their homes are also living in their homes. So that is sometimes difficult to get from folks, and the consequences of them not submitting that to us by those deadlines is they lose that entitlement, and it then reverts back to full pay. There is a window that they are able to reapply, but it is problematic.
The number of people who have to complete that verification is increasing.
Yes.
So it'll make it more difficult to meet.
Yes. So beyond the financial aspects, there's also the difficult to feed children aspect. We'll be able to receive less reimbursement to feed our kids.
Right, and
Yes.
yeah, so I think this is the low end, yes, is what I was also getting at.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Building evaluations, findings by working clock.
All right, thank you for having us this evening. So I have with me Cordigan Clark. You're not Cordigan Clark. So with the Vice President of Cordigan Clark with us, we want to talk about our facility condition assessment. It's been really interesting to go through. You'll notice we did send an additional draft update. This is changing. We continue to go through it. We're finding some interesting things. I think one thing I want to point out is we're continuing to find that we can see what we can visibly see with our eye, both the one that we did with our teachers and our parents who are architects, and as we walk through with our MOT. But now as we're going through this, again, it's things that we can see. We did find some new things. But as we're getting closer to like the bond and things like that, we're also continuing to have more things break through the building that, you can't see behind walls, right? So like we have a pipe at the high school that this week we just found like water's coming through on our first floor. Where is this coming from? But it's, again, something we're going to continue to go through. So I've asked Steve to be with us here tonight so he can talk through this. He does not have an Apple, so I'm going to pull the presentation up real quick and get that up. So give me just a second, and I'm going to get that up for us. If you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, certainly. My name is Steve Raskin with Cordigan Clark. We've had the privilege of working with the district for a number of years, and we've spent the last a couple of months working with our partners at Bureau Veritas, and we've conducted a facility conditions assessment. As Michael had mentioned, we are in the draft stages, so we've actually gone through and worked with field assessors. We've walked through all the buildings with the district's faculty and staff. We've gone through a questionnaire process about asking what works, what doesn't work. We've gone through the buildings and really looked at all manner of systems, both inside the buildings and outside the buildings. We've developed a series of draft documentation at this point. We are in the process of reviewing that information with the district, which has quite a bit of detail. And it's important to note that this is only a draft document at this point. This is something that we will continue to have conversations. I know we met with the Resource Committee, I think, on the 10th of this month, and there'll be subsequent conversations where we continue to have those conversations. There we are. Thank you. So this evening, we'll just talk about a couple of quick items. We'll talk about the facility condition assessment process. We'll talk about an assessment overview. We'll talk about something called reserve costs, and also touch on something called asset calc. Next slide, thank you. One of the questions always asked is, why do we do a facility condition assessment? And really, it's one of the first steps in the planning process. It's an analysis of the existing educational facilities. I would point out this is data-driven. What that means is we are not walking and looking and saying this is something that we'd like to do or something that might be aspirational, but rather we're looking at using proven methodologies and proven formulas. We're detailing cost data. We're identifying deferred maintenance items. We're also identifying critical infrastructure improvements. So this is a very formulaic and very process detailed system that we're working through. Next slide, please. It's important to note as we go through this, there's a series of categories of work that we evaluate, one of which is the site and infrastructure, which you see here in red. We look at parking lots, curbs, flat work, landscaping, utilities, outdoor stairs, and things like that. Next slide. We also look at building envelope and exterior of the building. That includes windows, doors, windows, stairways, and things of that nature. Next slide. We also look at rooftop and rooftop systems. This is important because this is really where a lot of issues can arise. We look at roof systems, membranes, flashings, parapets, skylights, rooftop equipment, all of those items that have generally shorter lifespans on a building system. Next slide. We'll also look at the building interiors, interior elements, walls, floors, ceilings. We look at lighting. We look at fixed components. We also look at accessibility items that are part of the structure. The next slide. And we also spend a fair amount of time looking at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. This includes your heating, your ventilation, your air conditioning. It also includes life safety systems and your security type systems. Next slide. There are a series of terms that I'd like to just briefly go through as part of this assessment. We talk about something called the expected useful life. That basically is the industry standard by which a system is expected to work. If you were to think of a roofing system, it would have an expected useful lifespan of perhaps 30 years. An effective age is basically the asset's condition in terms of years as it relates to that EUL. If the roof has been in place for 15 years and it has an expected useful life of 30 years, we can say that the effective age is about 15. The remaining useful life, of course, is the delta between the two. So 15 minus 15, that roof will have a remaining useful life of 15 years. Short-term considerations are a list of assets whose age has either reached or exceeded the industry accepted useful lifespan. Reserve items, we're going to talk about those in a bit, which are a list of assets whose age is less than the industry accepted, but whose replacement term falls within the reserve period. And for our purposes, we looked at a period of about 20 years. So we are looking at your building systems and your building pieces of equipment that will be in service from now through a period through 2044. Next slide. One of the things that we've evaluated as part of this process is something called the Facility Index Score. That's literally where we take the current replacement value and that's divided by the current needs. It's important to note that a current replacement value is a square footage cost. If your building is 100,000 square feet, we'll provide a value for it. It's what we see for replacement buildings. It's not the cost of a new building, but rather an analytical tool that we use. If the current needs or replacements that were identified as part of this assessment are $25,000, we will then get to a percentage that would be 25%. And as you see in this particular graphic, as we see things on the left-hand side of the table at 0%, that's green. That's very, very good. As we start to see costs that get into the 40s and 50 percentiles, then we start to look at issues that are more severe. I use the analogy of a car. After a car gets to be a certain years of age, you start putting more and more money into it. You have to start making those hard decisions about what you're going to be putting into that vehicle. Similarly, we're talking about what happens with our buildings. Next slide. So these are screen captures as part of our asset calc data collection system. These are the tools that the assessors use as they've gone through the facilities. We photograph individual building systems, we identify them. One of the key elements as part of this process is we look at not only the system itself, but we also identify the age of the system, the condition of the system. We also look at the total number or quantity, and also the numbers. So for instance, we look at the total square footages. We look at the total numbers of pieces. We also look at mechanical systems. We take a screen capture of the barcode that gives us make, model, manufacturer information. This is really critical because as we start to develop our detailed reports, and many of this information is included in the reports in front of you, we have very specific manufacturer data about how long these systems will be able to last and what we might be able to expect in terms of repair replacement costs. As we look at these buildings, I use the roofing as an example. It's easy to walk onto a roof that is within a year or two, and you look at the image on the left. It's in excellent condition. It's nice and weather tight. It won't only be a couple of years old. That would give us a remaining useful lifespan of 19 or 20 years. As you start to get to the right-hand side, you start to see different images of roofing systems. These are not your buildings. These are the tools that we use for our assessors. We start to look at cracks. We start to look at water infiltration. We start to look at deterioration of horizontal roof membrane systems, of flashing systems, and leaks throughout the system. So this is where we start to evaluate and provide more detailed information as part of these reports. So these are actual screen captures that were taken from the Asset Calc database that we've created. What we're looking at here is a series of plan type descriptors. This includes things like safety, which is not safety in the sense of school safety, but rather it is an observed or reported unsafe condition that if it is left unaddressed will create an unsafe system that could result in injury to an occupant. When we look at performance and integrity, we start to look at systems that are component or systems that have failed or near fail. We look at accessibility, things that do not meet current accessibility codes. We look at environment, which is improvements to indoor air water quality. We also look at retrofit adaptation, which are components or systems which may be recommended for upgrades to meet current standards, facility usage, or student uses and things of that nature. Life cycle renewal is the balance of the work, and you can see in this it's almost 80%. These are components or systems that are not currently deficient or problematic. However, they do fall within the reserve term of 20 years, and we track that information accordingly. So this is a broad brush view. This is called our 2024 reserve costs. What we've gone through on the left-hand side is we've looked at a variety of building systems. This includes all of the facilities that we've looked at. This is the early childhood, the junior high, high school. This also includes the elementary, the district offices, and I think that's all of them. What we've done is a compilation of all of those buildings. We've looked at structure, facade, roofing, interiors. You can see the immediate list. You see under the immediate column, the first one of $120,200. Those are immediate items that need addressing today. As we start to look at the various other columns on the right-hand side, we look at the 1 to 2 year, 3 to 5, 6, 10, and so forth. What we've done is we've identified each of the individual system expenditures, and we've broken those out via terms. So as you see in the immediate term of $120,000, as we look at the short term, 1 to 2 years, we look at $2.3 million. It's important to note what we're doing is we're costing this information on today's dollars. We are then including a 7% inflation year over year to get us to that 2 year short term. As we get to the 11 to 20 year long term, we take that same information and we include 7% year over year inflation. It gets us to a number of 32 million. When you sum all of the numbers on the very bottom of the list, we get a total number of about 47 million. It's important to note that these numbers are not cumulative. The immediate items are only included under the first column. Short-term is a second series of items, near-term, mid-term, long-term as well. If the items are not identified in the term that were included on this document, those costs would incur additional inflation and escalation as the term progresses. So this is a very, very broad brush term of what we have. The detailed books that you have in front of you, we've got one volume for each of the individual facilities. It includes a lot of additional information. Like I said, this is all very much in draft form. This is the information that our assessors, that the folks with the district have gone along and taken a look with us. Again, as Michael had mentioned, these are things that we see as we walk through. We have not done destructive testing. We have not dug holes in the walls. We have not done anything that would be destructive to the facilities, but rather these are things that we as assessors have evaluated through our observations.
Jenny, you look disappointed that
we didn't put holes in the wall.
If we see a hole, it's included. We did not make a hole to see something that we could not anticipate.
And then this is also part of a larger, so it doesn't cover like, technology upgrades that, the learning team would be looking at. It doesn't include furniture. So one thing that, we did, because, we want to attack some furniture needs that we have in the district. So over spring break, we had Color Art, which is one of our vendors. They came in and went to every single classroom, every single office, every single area where there is a piece of furniture over spring break, accessed that area, gave a, I wouldn't say analyze it, but they looked at a condition report. So they're doing that now, and they're going to be providing that back to us and saying, okay, this is the furniture that needs to be replaced immediately. Okay? This is the stuff that needs, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So we've already told, principals and teachers that don't expect to walk back in, the bond issue goes through, don't expect us to be ordering furniture like April 9th. We want to be very intentional. We want to be targeted with it. So we're working with them. We're going to be taking some teachers to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Steelcase and Smith Systems is paying for us to go up. They're going to be educating us for 3 days on what does the classroom look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So how do we adapt for students over time? What is that furniture going to look like? So that as we're spending our money, okay, we know how are we planning for the student of the future. So I'm actually planning that along with Dr. McGee. So it'll be myself, him, and then we also are including special school district in that. Emily is going with us because we want to make sure as we're planning our furniture for our students, so we're including all of our students. So we're very excited about that opportunity, and then that group will come back and help lead discussions. I've already had some brief discussions with some of our friends on the PAL board about them going down and helping lead some of those discussions with our ECC and our elementary students because they're a great group and they want to be empowered, and I think that they're the best ones to lead that. So we're trying to be intentional with that. So that's kind of a segue off of this, but everything we're doing, we're trying to be intentional with our planning and how we're approaching these things.
I guess I have a question.
Yes.
In your experience, is it no matter what type of material you use, no matter what type of technology upgrades to like HVACs and things like that, these life cycles are pretty consistent? Or is there anything that we could do that would extend the life cycle? There's types of materials that you would recommend or types of...
Very good question. It's a very broad question. As you talk about mechanical systems, to be frank, manufacturers design obsolescence. That's the way they do things to a certain degree. However, with regard to building systems, with regard to interior finishes, finding materials that will stand the test of time. A school is not constructed the same way your home might be. So the door hardware, the ceiling systems, the wall finishes, the flooring materials, those are all be designed and installed with an expectation of a much longer lifespan. So as we've evaluated the materials, as we've gone through this assessment, we have looked at what is currently installed. In some cases, you've got older materials that might be, you've got some wonderful resinous flooring, and you've got epoxy flooring in some locations that'll last 50 years. In other locations, you might have carpet, which will last a different period of time. So we've evaluated all the systems that you currently have in place at every location, and we've looked at it through that lens.
Josh, I would add to that is, you know, how do we lengthen the life of that? So maybe not in material, but it's in the preventative maintenance, right? So give you an example is, you know, servicing our rooftop units and making sure we're keeping them clean. We spend a lot of money paying a company to do that. Instead, on April 25th, I'm bringing in that company. Instead of them cleaning our units, they're cleaning our units and they're training our team on how to do that. So April 25th, my entire maintenance team will be up on the roofs with those guys so that instead of us paying a team to come in for a week and doing that, my guys can go up there when they have downtime and do a unit this day, do a unit another day. So that not only lengthens the use of our units, but it also is going to save our district money over time.
So I guess I have a question, Dr. Dietrich. You know, before we had this report, we were estimating around $8 to $9 million. It sounds like we found some additional stuff here. Do we know how has that impacted sort of the amount we're looking that we might need if we went out for a bond?
Yeah, I would say there's still a lot of things that I would say aren't on here. So like our playgrounds really aren't listed on here. They're on here, but like I would look at like our elementary, like it's not mulch, the play in place surface. You know, we've got some spots that are starting to pull up.
Were those factored in the other like reporting we did? I guess because we had
in the initial reporting,
Okay.
But then that was pulled out when
Okay.
we knew we weren't going to be able to go out for that amount of bond capacity. There were some safety systems that we wanted to include in bond that we pulled out because we didn't have the bonding capacity. So I would say there are still some things that we would love to do that we need to do. Yeah, so I would say that the number is still much higher than what we have planned.
If I might add, what you're looking at are reserve costs for specific items. These are not bid packages. These are not something that you give to a contractor and say, this is what you're going to do. What we've identified is this is what a specific boiler would be. Obviously, we've incorporated, you know, labor rates and we've included things like that. However, you may need to do other things as part of that. So this is a big part of that process, but this should not be construed as a final number as you get to that conversation.
Sure, I think I was just, I think this investigation was looking at some stuff we hadn't looked at before, so I guess that was more my question. What was there an impact, I guess? On what
Yeah, there were some things like I didn't foresee any like electrical issues at the ECC, and you know there's right outside the deck there's some major electrical components that were flagged that we need to look at, and I would say there's some things on every campus that we weren't really aware of that you know the inspectors caught, but I think that's where now you know where Navigate comes in of you know where they start to look at and say okay. Here's what the true cost of these things are. And I know they put in an inflation rate of 7%. I got something the other day from a vendor on, you know, the scoreboard saying if we don't order by April 1st, you know, it's going to have a 15% tariff. And I was like, you know, it's happening.
Any other comments, questions, concerns?
So it sounds like we're not going to expect new listings of potential projects for the current bond issue until after we know if it passes, and that the committee, the strategic plan committee, has begun looking at this to incorporate that in, and that they will continue to be able to do that with potentially the support of Navigate and others. Is that a correct assessment of like what we'll see next?
Yeah,
as far
I
as-
would say there's some certain projects that we are ready to move forward on.
Sure.
So like bond goes through track and field, we're ready to go. We've been through the RFQ process. We've met with all the vendors. We have it down to one. We have a plan. We're ready to go. There's some other things, smaller ones we're ready to go on. But there's a lot of them that we need to be very intentional and take our time. And so I would say no, there's no new big projects that have jumped out to us. So.
Yeah, I think this report really sort of gets us into maintenance planning more so than identifying what we already know. So this is sort of more a project that is going to allow us to look out 5, 10 years. How much do we need to address the needs then? The bond issue, hopefully, I'm hoping, gets us to that midterm 10-year point. So then we're looking at only the long-term things and when we have to do them.
And Trent, I would say that that addresses your question that was previously asked regarding how are we creating a surplus for those projects over time?
Yeah, I think it gets us into annual budgeting at some level, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Ms. Javier, do you have homework probably? Do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Abby, we got,
I can either present from here or up there.
Wherever.
So we're moving ahead to the ballot.
Yeah, just because it's.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so hi guys, always lovely to be here. Okay, so our focus, we usually have like an ask or like a topic, but this month we have another focus, more of an event that I'm going to talk a little bit about in a second, but I just wanted to recap on what we're working on. So next month, Maya's going to come up here and present about connections beyond the bell. So far, we have met with the ECC as well as the elementary school, and we do have plans on meeting with the middle school to kind of talk about extracurricular activities and the access to them. We talked about how that can look equitable across all the different schools because the high school level does have a bunch of extracurricular activities, but as we learned, as we kind of go lower into grade levels, that kind of narrows down. So we're trying to think of creative ways that we could broaden that. And then we also talked about the benefits of extracurriculars. I know personally that there's a bunch that like you learn a lot. So kind of looking into that. So we're super excited on that being a focus. And then we also wanted to do a little bit of a brief recap of PALB so far this year. Our first ask was having a communal space in the high school gym lobby, and it's actually really exciting. We got some furniture moved in there recently, so that's already like getting started, some leadway, so nice to see like some progress on that. If Mr. Dietrich wants to talk about that in a second, he totally can because he knows a lot more about it than I do. But we kind of looked at furniture throughout this whole year, keeping that in the back of our heads. As we talked about having student representatives kind of like have their say on certain furniture for like the classrooms because it is like their space, as well as teachers because it's a shared space, so making sure that everyone sees it as a safe and inspirational environment. So it's super cool that students are being included in that decision-making process, and we're super excited for PALB to kind of continue that, looking into it. We also talked about the school's metaphors when discussing the district's budget and kind of their benefits and how we need to keep having them. Each school has their own, and it's super unique, and the teachers try to find a unique teaching style to kind of surround these metaphors, so it's really nice to see. And then our most recent ask was hiring an athletic and activities trainer. Among at least the high school population, this has probably been like the one that we've gotten the most feedback on. A lot of the high school students, not necessarily in the PAL board, were super interested in this, had a lot to say. So they're really advocates for that, and we're super excited to see where all of this goes and hoping to progress that. And then finally, we are hosting a fireside chat on April 2nd at 6:30 in the high school theater. So for the first part of that, it's going to look like meeting all of the Board of Education candidates that are on the current ballot, asking them a couple of questions about either policies or their background, just why they're running, getting to know them a little bit. We did something like it last year. But then we will also, after that, be having all of the Board of Education members to talk about Propositions B and E, some stuff on the recent ballots, getting the community to kind of understand what that looks like, the benefits of them, what's happening with it. So if you can, just tell your neighbors, tell other community members to show up. The PAL board would really appreciate it. The community members would also learn a lot from the board directly. And getting involved in your local government is super important, so being able to kind of learn that. Once again, it's on April 2nd at 6:30, and we hope to see you there.
Thank you so much. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? All right, as always, you are welcome to stay, but if you want to go home and do stuff, we are not going to hold it against you. Okay, now we're going to move on to our regularly scheduled program with the technology audit by Dr. Abby Irwin and Dr. Chris McGee.
Good evening, everyone. As a part of our strategic plan, looking specifically at for our resources, I know I spend the bulk of my time and for our students, but also making sure that we are wise stewards of both our technology infrastructure as well as our fiscal responsibility. We thought it would be best to ensure that we are staffed appropriately and that we are doing the right things with our both digital and hardware footprint. So you have the full report. We gave you this sort of high-level overview, focusing on staffing and roles, infrastructure, tech systems, work orders, and support standards. And we've already made actionable a lot of these recommendations. Specifically, Dr. Irwin has been working for the last 3 years on a knowledge base that we called Bits and Bytes, which is a fantastic resource with videos, tutorials. It did not exist before, and it is a tremendous resource for our staff. So that will serve as our knowledge base and continue to grow as we move forward. Dr. Irwin's here to kind of give you a little bit about how this even happened.
Okay, I'm at that age now where I have to trombone stuff, so just for my notes. So we started this process back in October of this year, so October 2024. When we unrolled the strategic plan, the resource part also encompasses technology, and as Dr. McGee stated just recently, that includes the resources that are tangible, our hardware, programs that we utilize for both operations and instruction, but also the people that staff that department. So I'm just going to give you the methodology of the audit that was done for the department, and again, you have the full report in Board Docs, I believe, or Assembly now. So that audit was conducted by a firm that is called Educational Collaborators. They specialize in K-12 technology, so they are comprised of people who are still in education and serve in different capacities. For example, the head or the lead collaborator who came and worked with MRH is actually a local educator in a local school district and does this as some consultant side work. And so what they did was a triangulated approach to collecting information in order to give us this full report. So that included giving our tech team a self-study, which was basically going over all of the different things that we're involved in when it comes to hardware, software, network, how many computers we have, so on and so forth. Anything that you could pretty much think of in terms of technology and what people do, how many devices we have for students, how many devices we have for staff, and so on and so forth. After that, then we had Mr. Bill Bass, who is the lead collaborator, come to the district and do focus groups that included having a conversation with our technology department, and that also included students, staff, and administrators. So during that process, there were questions that were asked, and that information was collected to add to that qualitative component. And then finally, there was a survey sent out to targeted staff members. And so then once that was collected, there was time that they educational collaborators, met and compiled everything that you see in that report that was given. At the end of it, the audit revealed that we do have some overlaps in the department in terms of roles and responsibilities, but there's some gaps that we need to work on and that we have been trying to identify and work on based on our performance evaluation and the strategic plan. Things like service level agreements, so things that the department is fully invested in terms of support, things that we are partially invested in, things that the teachers can handle on their own. Having a consistent ticketing system and documentation for standard operatings and procedures. The recommendations also focused on realigning staffing to match the responsibilities of today's classrooms. Technology is way more ubiquitous than it used to be, especially in the post-COVID world. So there's a lot of that the things that were done, not necessarily by MRH technology departments, but technology departments in schools in general, they have kind of evolved into a more sophisticated role. And so making sure that we have those people in place, or that we have zone defense, if you will, in place for those things. But also making sure that we have shared documentation and we can plan proactively and more strategically for infrastructure needs that will expand to hopefully including more of our students. So we do have student interns this year. And I just want to brag a little bit. We have a sophomore right now who is becoming an Apple certified technician, and he's acquired 13 certifications. So just that alone can allow him to become someone who can do repairs. But that also aligns with the metaphor, but just having that expansion and giving them that real world access and experience, but also helping us out as a department. The report supports our strategic plan by looking at how we can be better at supporting classroom instruction, improving our department's staff efficiency, and aligning our tech resources with instruction and with where we would like to go as outlined in the strategic plan. And it also is just, we've been kind of laying the breadcrumbs for this in our department evaluations. So with this report, we have more guidance on how to be proactive with the roles that each of us serves in the department and long-term planning.
What questions can we answer for you?
Well, I have a question about overlap. Are you talking about overlap of like services we pay for, or overlap like redundancy of people that can do the same job?
More redundancy, yes, but some of it would apply to services. That is not outlined so much in this report, but it does give us some feedback and some recommendations on looking at software that we use for instructional purposes, and maybe, these do the same thing and the data involved in that, but primarily redundancy amongst our staff.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because people might be sick, or there might be, like, you might need somebody to be able to work on a project if another person is full on another project. So
correct.
It's not always a bad thing to have redundant positions like backups, especially when you're dealing with, like, the amount of time you're down is exponentially impacting education versus the amount of time.
Oh, for sure. And some of it too, and again, this report it gives us areas where we can focus on growth, but it also identifies some of the areas that we are doing well with where we are currently. And overlap can also be having that backup, like you said. So if, for example, person A is assigned to two of our locations in person, they're out, then do we have somebody to be in place in that particular, be the substitute, if you will?
I thought it was interesting. It seemed really cool how it went through and sort of it's like identifying who's like the expert in which area, making sure you have all the areas covered in positions. And then I really liked the thing about like using students. So it's really cool to hear that we have a student doing that because that to me, especially with our metaphor, that like helping students and then it helps. So that's really cool to hear there's a student that's already on.
Yeah, so
getting there.
we've increased from one intern through Mr. Saucel's class to two. So I mean we've doubled it, and they've just done a really good job with embracing the fact that technology is not always predictable, and so there are areas that each of us in the department specialize in, but sometimes there are things that come up where you have to learn on the fly, and they're getting a taste of all of those things just working on the days that they're assigned to that. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, next we've got the climate and culture survey data by Vince Estrada.
Good evening, board, MRH community. Vince Estrada, Director of Student Services for MRH, and I'm actually excited to talk to you about a survey, which is not a sentence I've ever uttered in my life. But I'll tell you why, because we've been doing the climate and culture survey for several years. But with every passing year, our teams are really increasingly embracing the data and doing stuff with it. Years past, we'd do a survey, celebrate some successes, admire the problem, and just hope we got better. And now we're really digging in deep to some work. So it's been and actually just timely, the last couple of weeks we've really been looking at some of this data. So I wanted to kind of share with you the results of our fall survey, which is our second year using this particular tool. As you know, climate and culture survey is mandated by the state of Missouri, but that's not the only reason we do it. It does help us. And so we figured if we have to do it, let's use,
Vince, I think
oh
your
my goodness.
presentation is rolling maybe.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
you have it on time, so you may want to release it in
Autopilot, oh golly. Well, anyway, any questions? Any questions? I want to do a slideshow because,
I know I said 5 minutes, Vince, but
Man. I'm looking at Dr. Davis, I'm like, what am I messing up or something like that?
So Vince, when it comes up, hit the right arrow.
I got it. I'm good. Anyway, I'm Vince Estrada, Director of Student Services. Anyway, what I was saying before I was finished, it's like speed dating. So this is the second year we're using a particular tool, and what's kind of neat about it is our strategic plan benefit from the climate and culture data. It feeds right into for our people, conversations, for our health, and for our community. The key parts of this is you want to do a few things. You want to make sure all stakeholders are in our survey, so we interview staff, teaching staff, support staff, which is new this year, family, and students. You got to have all players there, and then you have to analyze the data. You want to share the results, which we're doing right now. We also share them in other spaces as well. And then do something with the information. Implement some strategies. Take some action steps. A couple, kind of anchors of this process, using evidence-based methods. We're using a survey that was developed by the University of Missouri, tried and true. It's also free. It's been really useful, and we work in partnership with them so that they provide a lot of free technical assistance. Secondly, what's critically important for this climate and culture survey is that student voices, questions are embedded in the surveys for the families, the students, and the staff. And then the third thing is, the third anchor is that you establish procedures. What are you going to do with this information? And this climate and culture data is being shared with MTSS teams, climate and culture teams, all kinds of PAL groups, all kinds of folks. So this really we're actually digging more into the data than we've ever done before. And then again, just to provide that information to all stakeholders. Real quickly, it's on a Likert scale, 4-point scale. So you got to sort of when you answer a question, you got to kind of go on either side, one way or the other. It codes at 3.2. It's a 4-point scale. So 3.2 to 4 is green. They're doing well in that area. 2.0 to 3.2 is yellow, a growth opportunity, and less than 2 is a red. Just to let you know, we have nothing in the red on any area or any particular question. Doesn't mean we don't have growth opportunities, but nothing came up red for us in all the stakeholder groups and all the questions in individual areas. Participation rates. I want to publicly thank everyone for participating, but our families have really come out. I feel pretty good about the 40% participation rate from families. It's hard. People get surveyed to death because it's easier to produce surveys. They're so easy to produce. So we get a lot of surveys, and I do want to thank the families for their consistent participation in this process. One of the things we did to improve that for the families is last year, you had to answer every question. And so this year we went through this survey and made some of the questions optional if you didn't really have an opinion about certain things. And I think that was the feedback we got from some of our families, so that really did, I think, improve their participation rate. You also know, generally speaking, that the participation rate was much higher in the fall, back to school. Everyone's kind of feeling pretty good about it. And the spring participation rates were lower. I think there's a lot of things happening in the spring. There's a bit of survey fatigue. The timing is tricky because there's a lot of things happening in the spring, like expeditions and trips and things like that. But we only have to really administer a survey once a year. We chose to do it twice a year because that was a concern and a worry and a shared priority for this community on climate and culture a couple years ago. So we wanted a couple of different data points, fall to fall and fall to spring. But our obligation under the state law is just to do that once a year. The other thing that's tricky about the spring is really coordinating with other surveys that are going out at the same time. But we did have higher participation in the fall than we did last spring and pretty comparable to last fall. Positive growth areas. So lots to celebrate here. Again, overall, our scores have improved from the initial admission of this survey in the fall of 2023. If I looked at you look at some of the raw data you guys got, there's more stuff in the green than ever before. So overall, we're trending in the right direction. The cool thing about looking at survey data is when you really dig into it, it begs more questions. It creates more conversations. That's the real value of the survey. So when teachers are telling us, I feel pretty safe here, I want to ask, well, why? Tell me more about that. And it creates really great conversations, which we see taking place in our spaces. I think the school safety score went up, was a notable improvement. And I think this district's commitment to really creating physically safe buildings, I think has really kind of improved people's feelings of safety here. Data sharing also went up. It was one of our lowest scores, but we have really beat the drum in terms of what I'm doing here, but in lots of spaces. We're meeting with the POW board, MTSS team, climate and culture teams are all not only getting the data like in the presentation, but digging into it. In fact, we had an MTSS meeting just last week? This week. Yeah, and we dug into all the data. We got into small groups, and it was kind of intriguing. At first, we're like, ugh, spreadsheets. But then we sort of got into it, and we started having some good conversations about it. The climate teams are using this data to really dig in and kind of identify priority areas and do some action items. Institutional environment. Generally speaking, the staff and the families and the students feel like the space is pretty good. They have what they need here, generally speaking. So those were some areas of positive things. I wanted to talk about the staff survey. The staff survey, if you saw, is pretty teacher-centric. It's really focused on our certified staff or non-certified staff that are working directly with kids the majority of their day. It didn't really speak to our support staff, who are so important to us. It didn't really speak to their experience. So Dr. Jameson helped us find with her numerous contacts in other districts, a good support staff survey that really spoke to their experience. And we administered that for the first time this fall. So we don't really have growth to show because we just established a baseline this year. But there were some really strong scores there. The top thing that they rated for themselves was that their work is meaningful. It was a really high score for them. Our support staff appreciate the professional learning opportunities they have here and our commitment to diversity. Those were three of the highest scores that our support staff noted in their survey. Areas of stability were pretty consistent, solid student voice, structures of learning, which is kind of curriculum materials and resources and things for teachers to use, and kind of PD, and parent involvement. And parent involvement, as long as I've been working in public ed, has always tracked really high at the Early Childhood Center with gradual, and I think it really depends on how people see parent involvement, really. I just think it looks different. I don't think it's really less involved. I think it just really looks different. But the scores have been pretty consistent in those three areas over the surveys. In terms of growth opportunities, there were some. The support staff were looking for some more assistance and some more support in communication and transparency with their leadership. They often work pretty independently. Some of those folks work in the evening, so it really is challenging to really kind of continue the connection with them and to communicate with them and keep them involved depending on their job here. The other thing that support staff noted was it was interesting because they had a high score for feeling their work was meaningful, but a low score, relatively speaking, in terms of its connection to the mission. So I don't know if that's about communication or really kind of talking about the mission in their work. So there was a real big disconnect. So they think they're doing great work here, but they're not sure if it's really connected to the missions. That's something we can really unpack with them, would beg more questions. In terms of the students, there was a really interesting piece of data that tracked both in the student survey and the staff, is that student behavior interferes to some degree with the teacher's ability to teach. That's what the teacher said, because sometimes it's pretty tough on a particular day. That's also what the students said consistently, which I thought was really powerful and something worth unpacking as well. And the students' sense of their ability to do well in school, we'd love to see a little bit higher. So those are things we really want to unpack with our community as well. Action steps, focus groups with support staff, hopefully to be completed by June 2025. We talked about that partnership with the St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative. It's fantastic because their focus, this is kind of a win-win because their focus and what they're getting out of it is really learning about teacher care and retention. And because they have funding to do that, we're like, hey, we're happy to partner because we can benefit from that without having to pay for it. So we have this really strong, consultative, passionate group of folks that will compensate some of our staff working side by side to help us really unpack in a real meaningful and depth way over the next 3 years about climate and culture, staff retention, which is important, and care. So it's a great partnership. Facilitating student focus groups. We have a graduate student from the Brown School of Social Work that initiated a project this year. She has a project evaluation program, and she's doing focus groups based on the student data. And I think that's the first time we've ever actually taken student data and brought it back to the students to hear from them. We've often done surveys with them, looked at it, and then we send it to the adults to figure it out. But we're actually going to the students. We met with the PAL board, Students for Social Justice, the Women Look Ahead. Those are some of our focus groups. And she'll have a completed report for us by the spring. Continue to look at data differences by grade and by building, and again, to embed these things in our strategic planning, which we actually did with our planning to do when we meet with our next 4 health group. Now, questions.
Well, the only question I have, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, do you have any idea why the student voice decreased? Like what is actually going on?
No, but that's something that we'll probably be asking. I mean, it was a nominal.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious about like, well, any fluctuations. Like, I mean, it could be this time of year, it could be when they were taking the whatever. But
So that's something we'll be unpacking with the focus group with the students. Yeah.
I will tell you that in my meetings with the PAL board and Ms. Huffman, it's not, it's increasing the students who have voice. So Vince talked about the PAL board, talked about student council. It's typically the same students.
Right.
So it's identifying those hidden gems that have voices and a perspective to be able to contribute to what they think should happen in the district. So we do have some ideas. We have been looping in our all-ed students in some of those conversations because they do great work with students and they have a very interesting perspective, believe it or not.
They do.
So I think that's the work that we need to do, tap into the voices that aren't frequently heard.
Actually, with the PAL board, we're going to do a focus group with them, but actually, they actually want to join us in helping reach other students to hear from them. So not just the PAL board leaders. In fact, I met with Beatrice and some other cool kids, and we had a great meeting, but they're really interested in hearing more. They had a great idea. Not only do they want to hear from students about all these issues, but they wanted to unpack and see if there were particular groups of folks that felt more disconnected. So they asked me, I had an assignment from them. The PAL board gave me an assignment, and I completed it on time. But they said, I want to know about the certain, yeah, she's laughing. They were really interested in finding out if there were groups of students that were particularly disconnected. Students of color, LGBTQI. Those folks. So I gave them some of the data for them to look at as well. So I'm excited. This is the most work we've ever done with this data in all my years here. So it's been great. Any other questions?
Vince, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
The data you have here in the raw data presentation refers to the fall 2024. But what you've been presenting to us, is this the fall 24 data or is this spring?
Fall. We haven't. We have not administered the spring one. Yes.
Okay,
Fall.
So that's still coming.
Correct.
And then, is it possible to get the questions that were administered? And the other thing is, since this is designed by or adapted by the University of Missouri for MSIP 6
It's, yeah.
meet that standard, or meet those requirements, I guess the survey is used widely across the state? Or
It is,
many
yeah.
districts?
Some
Do we
districts use different surveys that meet the criterion. The thing that could make the MSIP requirement is you had to have the questions about student voice. So what Mizzou did is they took a national survey and they adapted it to meet MSIP standards.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible to get comparisons to other districts or how we're doing statewide with this survey?
That's a good possibility. Probably not survey to survey, I'm not sure, but I can maybe find out who else is doing this particular survey and see if we can compare their results.
We could get it from those who are using the same survey.
Yes.
But not, because most individuals are using the
SE one.
DESI one, and that's the one that we said didn't necessarily give us the information.
It was clunky and that
not
was
a very
great.
good one.
That's a great question. I can definitely give you the questions too. The student survey is short, it's 11 questions. The staff survey is 30 plus, and so what they do with the staff survey is they kind of, like questions 1 through 7 are on staff connections.
Yeah.
And so they kind of cluster the questions that way. Yeah, I can give you the
Well, if
questions.
we could, if you'd be able to provide at some point here the questions themselves,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Happy to do that, yes. So questions and comparative data.
Well, it sounds like that comparative data may be more difficult, so it's.
Well, it depends. We just have to ask them. We're also using it in the state and see how they come
Sure.
up.
Yeah, to the extent you have time, that'd be great, but
Sure.
certainly I understand you have other demands.
No problem. Okay, great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to number 5, which is finance. February financial statements. Chris Holder.
All right, good evening, everybody. We'll start with revenue. Operating revenue through February are right at $23.2 million and about 81% of the budget. That is about an 8.5% increase over the prior year. And those increases are related to the net insurance recovery reimbursements, interest income, the CBE grant, MSD grant, the in lieu of taxes from a closed TIF in Maplewood, the DNR scrap tire grant, sale of property. We've sold the one house. We closed on another yesterday, yes, on the 26th. And then SSD salary reimbursements payment received. I'm excited about that one because we're going to pick up that check tomorrow. So,
154,000.
yeah, that's a good day. And one that I didn't put on here is we did receive a $55,000 child subsidy grant earlier in the fall, and we are about to spend that money on some upgrades for our early childhood center. So we are excited about that. On the expenditure side, 76.5% of our expenses are devoted to our employee salaries and benefits, and we are expended at this point in the year through February $12.6 million, which is on par percentage-wise to the prior year. Purchase services expenses through February are 2.3 million, or 60% of the budget. At the prior year was 2.1 or 55%. Those increases are related to property and liability insurances that we were anticipating increases of, but not to the extent that we received. So we were a little disappointed in that. The supplies expenditures, 1.3 million, and versus the prior year, just under 1.2 at this point in the year at 50%. And that's due to moving the food supplies expenses from purchased services to supplies. That was a requirement that DESI gave to us as we were completing the ASBR, and we completed on the last budget amendment, but was not in place at the start of the budget. So things look a little different between years there on the food supplies. So capital outlay, $361,000, or 90% higher than the previous year at 78%. Long and short-term debt on the operating side, this is related to our COPS or lease purchase agreement. We do have the payment queued up. That just went, it'll go April 1st, actually. So higher than the previous year. We're expecting that. Remaining principal and interest payments are paid in April. Again, those will actually hit the bank on March 31st, so that they are the funds are available to the investors on April 1st. Overall, our operating expenses to date through February are $16.7 million. Right now, we're budgeting for an ending fund balance of 33.9. As we come into the spring, we're starting to get a clearer picture of how finances are going to end. As we conclude the fiscal year, we are holding folks accountable to their budgets, and we're making the wise decisions as we possibly can and still deliver those critical services to our staff and our students. Questions? All right. Mr. President, may I move on?
Yes, please.
I'm going to drop that so you don't have to look at my messy desktop, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so this budget will look a little bit different than last month. Last month was just a first look at revenue. Revenue has changed quite a bit. We did get the updated preliminary assessed valuations from the county. We did not have the new construction estimates when those numbers were released for the purposes of this presentation. Those were released on the 17th. We posted this on the 14th, so we will have an update next month. The numbers did move around a little bit, but nothing extraordinary. So again, these haven't changed. The residential rate's projected to be 3.9788, commercial at 4.4764, and personal property at 5.9858, and that does include the potential 50-cent transfer from the debt service levy to the operating levy. So those funds will be allocated at $22.5 million to the general fund, $536,000 to the capital projects fund. Traditionally, we've put 10 cents of the levy into the capital projects funds. That's not a requirement. That's a choice that we've made as a district, and we can have conversations about that as we get closer to tax rate season when we come into the fall. Debt service at $4.55 million, and that does calculate at the 85%, the 85-cent debt service levy as a result of the transfer. So I thought it would be important to show you what things would look like without that 50-cent transfer. So the general fund, you can see, is $17.8 million, $475 to the capital projects fund, again with that 10 cents, and the debt service levy at $4 million, and that does include the 85. So this would anticipate that the bond would pass and the levy would fail. So this is kind of like the worst case scenario when it comes to how this would play out. And collection rate is also important. I like to shoot this a little bit low. We are in a reassessment year, so we do traditionally see the collection rate just a little bit lower in those years. We always get it back in delinquent taxes, but it does reduce the current taxes. So state funding. What we know right now, these numbers are based on the finance memos that we get from the state every month, and those numbers have moved around a little bit, but again, these numbers are based on the information that I have on hand currently. So right now, we're looking at about a $482,000 increase on the basic formula. Classroom trust fund would be a bit of a reduction. They have changed the numbers around a little bit. They've raised one and lowered another. They fiddle with those numbers year to year for various reasons that we won't get into tonight. Prop C, which is our sales tax, is actually a local revenue that's paid through the state. So I included it here on the state, and that's a $115,000 increase. Sales tax does continue to come in strong. Consumer price index is, we're calculating at 2.9% for the coming tax year. All in all, we are looking at right now, again, this could change, $561,977 in state funding. Okay, so here is, look at column 2026. You can see the variance here, so that's a 27.5% increase to local revenue, and that is due to a couple of factors. Number one is the increase to the operating levy projected. It's also related to the 20% increases in the preschool tuition and Discover Club fees. There's a couple of other local revenues in there as well that we'll break out as we get further into the budget. County revenue, expecting a little bit of a decrease. Again, that's probably a bit conservative, but we'll get a clearer picture as we get further into the spring. And then state revenue, already discussed that, $93.5 thousand overall. And then federal revenue, we are anticipating a decrease. We did receive some of the ESSER funds from the ARP this year as prior year payments. We don't believe that we'll have any of those prior year payments in the coming year. Non-current revenue, that's really big, and we're not anticipating any yet for the coming year, but that $1.2 million, just so there's not an alarm here, is the sale of property. It's also the net insurance recovery, so things that also pilots as well, so things that won't necessarily reoccur, so we have pulled those out for the next year. And then the revenue from other LEAs at $15,000. We are coming in strong this year. I don't know that we'll hit that $40,000 target, but the $15,000 seems reasonable for the coming year. This is always it's a moving target. We never know. So this is a conservative number as well. Just a graphical representation of the movement over time of each of the revenue sources. Okay, on to the expense side. Salaries are projected to increase $1.3 million or 8% across all of our salary categories. That does include certificated teachers, support staff, and administrators. And we've discussed those increases in various projections that have been shared with the board in prior months. Those increases are due to 8% increase to teacher salaries along with the movement on the approved salary schedule. So again, we've increased the base of the teacher salary schedule 8% and then movement of the step at 2.75%. And this is a 3.75% increase to the support staff salary base along with their 2.75% step, which mathematically does not exactly equal 6.5% for everybody. It's thereabouts though. So that is it's a good increase for our support staff, our valued support staff. And then a 3.75% increase to administrator salaries. And I will say that I believe that those ranges, how we range in the county, have been shared with you, and that 3.75 does not move the administrator salaries at all in the rankings as we look comparatively at the rest of the county. Benefits are projected to increase at $311,000. We are still working on this number. We sat in our insurance advisory committee meeting last week, and it was a little depressing. I'm not quite ready to show those numbers yet, but we'll talk about those in the coming months. But medical insurance premiums will be increasing more than we had originally anticipated. So we will, as we continue to review and revise and refine position control, which was happening about an hour before this meeting, in fact, we'll get those numbers a little closer to what I think they'll actually be. PSRS, our retirement system, PSRS being for the certificated teachers and administrators, peers being for our non-certificated employees, and Social Security. Those all scale to salaries, and as far as retirement is concerned, health insurances are included in the retirement salary calculation. So as those go up, also does retirement. Purchase services. I know that there's been quite a bit of talk about purchase services in prior months, and rightly so. We spend a lot on purchase services. So I've broken out some of the high flyers here, some of those that are essentially fixed line items in the budget. There's not really a whole lot of room for us as a district to change these things, and I'm going to hit them quickly, but feel free to stop me if you do have any questions about them. So maintenance and repairs, which includes facilities and vehicles, we're budgeting right now at $304,000. I do expect this number to be adjusted, especially we've not reviewed the operations department budget. Dr. J and I have not done that yet. We will be in this, we're out of this week, but as we hit next week, we'll hit the rest of the buildings and departments. Contracted food services is just the purchase service side of our Chartwell's contract, not the food supplies. You'll see that number here in a minute. Professional development, $215,000 of that related to the CBE grant. While all of those funds, the $400,000, were budgeted in fiscal '25, not all were expended. So that does create a little bit of a shift. So we're reducing the budgets for '25 and adding budgets for '26. The revenue was recognized in '24 and '25. So we're now crossing in the third fiscal year. And do you have a timeline in which you must spend all of these funds?
According to the grant, we are going to milk that to the extent we possibly can. So ideally, 2028 is the ideal time.
So expect to see these expenditures for the next couple fiscal years. Thanks, Chris. And then sub nurses, teachers, and secretaries. Expeditions, we know that that's a fixed cost as well. We are looking at a bit of a structure change for how we fund these, though, and we can talk about that as we move forward. Summer school programming, this is a big number, and I understand that, but I also need everyone to understand that there's also a revenue component to this that pays for this plus more. So the summer school does generate revenue in the form of state revenue. So this number is absorbed by that revenue received. Utilities, we are expecting an increase in sewer, water and sewer. Those two follow each other. So this is the number that we're projecting at this point. Property insurances, you can see here, printer and copier lease and maintenance. I always feel like there's ways for us to reduce this cost based on usage. I'm not as mean about it as I have been in the past. Stop hitting the print button and just use the electronic version. Color copies are extraordinarily expensive. Every time you run a piece of paper through the machine that comes out color, it's a little over 7 cents, I believe, per impression once we get past our monthly allotment. So if anyone's listening and you're hitting print on the color side, maybe think about the black and white side. It's a lot cheaper. Bus lease, this is another fixed line item, and then audit and legal services together, projecting right now about $90,000. We do have the RFQ out for audit services. We're going to reissue that as we only received the one response, so we're going to directly solicit. The lawyers' media did not catch as many as we expected, so we're going to do some direct application of that RFQ again and see if we can't get a little bit better number. But we always do have the opportunity to negotiate once we make a selection as well. So looking forward to some of those conversations with some of the audit firms in the area. So you can see right now we're about a $285,000 decrease from the prior year. Dr. Jameson, our accountant, Tony Arnzen, and myself have been reviewing building budgets. I believe as of yesterday, we got through 2 buildings. We'll get through 2 more buildings either tomorrow, Monday, or Tuesday, and then we'll hit those departments. And I do believe we've already made some significant reductions in those 2 buildings that we've reviewed, and I anticipate more as we hit the departments. Here's the food supplies that I referenced earlier. Josh, I think you said it earlier, stuff's not getting cheaper, so we can expect food costs to increase as well. Electric and natural gas, I don't know why they call them supplies, but that's what they're classified as. Here they are, $365,000. Gas and diesel, and I believe propane is also included in this number for our propane-fueled buses. And then technology. Chromebooks and iPads, we are investigating a shift in the technology provided to some of our younger students. We're looking at the economy of that, and there's two factors involved in that. There's the cost factor, but there's also the age appropriateness factor and what makes sense for our youngest learners. And it's what we're learning is, and what we have learned and continue to experience is the Chromebook is probably not the most age-appropriate device for those young students. So we're looking at some options, and we'll bring those to you in coming months as we get closer to the end of the fiscal. Tech subscriptions and systems, again, this is another one of those areas. There's a lot of money that we expend on these systems, but we are really holding our buildings and departments and teachers and other users of these systems accountable to their usage. We're collecting metrics and making decisions based on those trends. I believe we've already cut a couple, and we have to be careful here because this is also a primary resource for our educators and for our students. So these are not willy-nilly bring out the hatchet and cut these things out. These are well thought out, and Dr. Irwin's been a fantastic partner as we go through the process of evaluating these systems to decide what stays and what goes. And then here's the instructional and general supplies and the cost for that. So you can see overall, that's the biggest number that you see here, and which in my opinion is appropriate. We do have a couple of capital expenditures. It's important to mention the capitalization threshold was shifted. It was actually shifted for fiscal 25, but DESE gave us the option to maintain the $1,000 threshold because all of our budgets were done by the time they told us this. So it was a bit of a surprise that they changed that capitalization threshold to $5,000. But that does put more items into the supplies category. It just moves them. So while we may not experience the savings that we had thought on supplies, we could experience a decrease on the capital expenditure side. So soccer goals, I've learned that our soccer goals the wheels have fallen off, and there's things like that. That doesn't mean that we couldn't use other funds to pay for these things, but right now we're capturing those costs in the operations budget. The maintenance shop garage door, that's needed replaced since I've been here. I think it's been replaced once, and it's still not great. That is an access and safety issue that we need to address sooner than later. Spot vision screener, this, I'm not sure we needed to perseverate on this, but this is something that has been a request from our Student Services Department and does help our PAT group also as they evaluate students and get them ready for entry into our school system. And then technology right now on the capital outlay side is $75,000. Put my glasses a little closer to my eyes. There are a ton, and I'm sure Dr. Dietrich is looking at these numbers and saying, wait. There are a number of those capital expenditures that were included in the operations budget that we culled on our first pass through in anticipation of the bond. If the bond should not pass, we will apply some of those here, but we'll have to do that very discriminately as funds on the fund balance are limited. So we'll prioritize as we go through that process. Here's the overall look on expenditures. So you can see here right now we're looking at about a 3% increase in expenditures overall. Considering the increases in salaries and benefits, this isn't a terrible number, but we are at the very earliest stages of reviewing these budgets and refining them. We don't have a whole lot of time to get through that. I'm hopeful that in April we will be nearly done with that, but I can't make that promise. Things are moving really fast and we're working very hard to get this done. It's a lot of information to digest and adjust, and we have to make sure that we're making decisions in the best interest of not only our fund balance, but also our educators and our students. Here's the distribution of our operating expenditures. With the increase in salaries and benefits, that does shift us a little bit closer to that 80% threshold on salaries and benefits, which is where a lot of districts tend to land and where we looks like we're going to get close to that, which is fantastic. It's our most valuable resource that we expend funds on. Okay, lots of numbers. I apologize for that. You can just focus on the 26 column and look for the bolds. I tried to bring out the numbers that I needed you to look at. So right now we're looking at the revenue of 33.7, just about $33.8 million. Again, these numbers are fluid. They're moving. We will get you'll get an updated number on local taxes. Well, April 8th is just around the corner, so you'll get an update there, but we've also have the new construction numbers, and of course we get multiple versions of assessed values as we move through the spring and into the summer prior to tax rate season in the fall. Expenditures right now, we're looking at about $30.2 million, which would end us with a surplus should the operating levy increase pass. We are looking at a 3.5% surplus, which would put us at a fund balance ending of 44.7%. And you can see, and I have baked in the 2 years of the CBA agreement into this. I've also anticipated larger than usual benefits. I've increased the supplies. I've left purchase services static. That's probably a little bit wishful thinking in anticipation of trying to lower that again. We're keeping a sharp eye on purchase services. But as I shared with you earlier, a number of those are fixed line items in the budget, and they're things that we just can't remove. So you can see what the fund balance does over time given these other factors, and you can see here also that I have not adjusted revenue upward for fiscals 27, 28, or 29. We kick it up, I think, 2.5%. So a lot of information, a lot of numbers. Here's the next piece. So this is the worst case scenario on what things would look like with the budget, the expenditure budget, as I presented it this evening. This is what the impact would be should the operating levy transfer not pass in a couple Tuesdays. So this is what would happen. So obviously, we would not go with that budget. We would dig into that and we would make very different choices as we move through this budgeting season, and that will all depend on the outcome of the April 8th election. We've got a lot of work yet to do. I will tell you that it's been fantastic having our new accounting manager on staff. He's been a fantastic partner. As a matter of fact, I had to step away yesterday, and he was able to finish the budget meeting with Dr. J, and I think she experienced, like I do every day, he's fantastic to work with and doing a great job. Review and adjust building and department budgets. That's our first priority. Then review and update position control. That's an ongoing priority for me. Continuing to review and update the revenue budgets as we get new information from the state, fed, county, local, and then working on the budget document. As you know and have mentioned in the past, it's a very large and complex document, and we have not started to bring the data into that yet. So that's one of my projects for next week, is to start laying the underpinnings for creating that large document. What questions might you have?
I just have one question, actually. So just those last couple of slides of the budget summary, with and without the levy. The long and short-term debt,
Yes.
was that being paid with bond proceeds?
No.
Okay.
What you're seeing here is just operating, which I include capital projects in operating. DESI doesn't do that, but I do. The operating debt that you see here, long and short-term debt, is the lease purchase agreement, that $3.5 million. That lives on the operations side of the budget, not debt service, correct? Yeah. The only thing we can use debt service on is voter-approved bond sales. Good question. All right, thank you. Ton of work has been done, but a ton left to go. So I look forward to bringing you more in April.
Thanks so much. All right, moving on to communications discussions. Calendar of events. March is almost over. Big thing coming up is the election, so there's that. I don't think there's anything really going on the rest of this month. I'm not sure what else is going on at school as far as activities, but the kids are usually busy with something, so maybe there's something going on. I don't know.
Our work session is canceled for next week, that's?
Yeah. Right. Then we already went through the PAL board report, so we're gonna go on to the committee reports.
I had one. We had for our people, oh, sorry, did you have a question?
No, I don't think so.
For our people met last night, so correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but we went through sort of all the steps that were outlined in our portion of the strategic plan, and sort of we looked at what Dr. Amos-Phillips and Dr. Sharp had sort of planned out, because they were all originally supposed to be completed in like the first 2 years of the 5-year plan, which is not attainable for anyone. So sort of they mapped out how moving some of that, and most things have actually already been started, but we got some good input from the community member about how to sort of show to community, like, even if it's yellow, really when most of it's done, like how to show the community, like, we're really almost done, it's just still yellow because there's one thing. So that was really good input. And then we went through the latest versions of the evaluation tool for teachers and for instructional support staff. That will be coming to us, the final versions, next month for review and approval. And then and then we did talk about that, the fellowship program, which was through that, what is it? I don't know the acronym. Thank you. Which looked really cool. The details about it were really cool. So I think that will be cool. For, you said 9 people applied? 9 staff members applied, so that's awesome. And I feel like I'm forgetting something else. Oh yeah, we went through the Teacher of the Year and Support Staff of the Year program, and like how that all works. So yes, thank you. And that was it.
I also have a report. I attended the SSD Governing Council meeting in early March or mid-March, and 3 items. One, the parents advisory councils that meet within each district. There's a new president of the parent advisory councils, Crystal Lay, and she would like parents in our district as well as other districts who are
in receiving services from SSD to be more participative in the parent advisory councils, and they're working on 4 issues this month in April: service minute delivery concerns, trying to help parents understand staffing changes and cuts that are coming in SSD, increase awareness of the parent advisory councils and the work that they could do next year, and also concerns about 504 legislation and what they can do to advocate for some changes. The second item is the budget. SSD's budget is in serious shambles. They have been trying for the past several months to, as they called it, right the ship. That was a phrase used, I think, 24 times in the meeting. But they're basically in a $70 million deficit this year, and they're trying to get that to only a $53 million deficit for this year. And that's why, if you've been following the news related to SSD, there's so many staffing changes and cuts coming, is because they're trying to, as they said many times, quote, right the ship. There is a new candidate that was elected to the, or appointed to the board because no other person put their name in to run. So we approved Aaron Beaver to join the SSD Board of Education. And then finally, the superintendent of SSD was named Emerging Superintendent of the Year for this region amongst all of the other superintendents in the region at that category. So it was quite a nice honor for him. We celebrated that.
It's my understanding that SSD actually, I mean, I know it's not all doom and gloom, because I think that they were struggling, like severely struggling, maybe just a year or 2 ago. Am I crazy? I thought they were on something like.
Yeah, their hope is to get back to a budget that is net positive by AY 27-28. Yeah, so it's going to be a few years of repair.
That MRH did not lose staff, so do want to celebrate that. So thank you, Emily.
Okay, where are we? Anybody else? Yeah, it looks like a lot of the next meetings are in May. Okay, school board election updates. So as y'all know, the election is sort of perfunctory because we've got 3 openings, but 2 candidates for 2 openings, and we anticipate that, they will be elected and sworn in on the board. But
And can we thank Linda for her service?
I'm not done yet.
Oh,
is this?
I mean, yeah, if you want to do that now. Thank you, Linda, for your service.
Tonight is Linda's last meeting. I just would like to say thank you for, you're the second longest tenured board member after me. So you as an MRH graduate yourself, I think really brought a lot of honor to that position. We're certainly going to miss your perspective and your Blue Devil pride. So thank you, Linda.
Okay, so, well, I mean, now I feel like a jerk. So,
I've got your back, we
you.
all have our role to play
I
there, right?
appreciate it. I didn't realize that tonight was the end of it, but so sad. Okay. Yeah, where was I? Oh, right. The exciting news, as Ms. Javier did explain, we were going to have a fireside chat, and so there is sort of a double treat there, where we not only get to talk to our current board member who is going to be staying on, but our newest prospective board member who is a returning face, but we're glad to have her back, and listen to sort of what their plans are. And also, we're going to have some in-depth discussion about the propositions. So hopefully there's a big turnout for that. And I think that is it as far as board candidates go. Let's see. board. Okay, so we did have a member resign. Christy Martinez resigned her position, and we wish her well in her future endeavors. The process for filling her spot is, I mean, it's not super complicated, but we do have to announce that there is now a open position, and we will post a notice that there is an open position. We will take applicants, and, you know, they'll apply. We'll review the applications. We'll have a panel of those applicants, and then we will choose a replacement. That replacement, I believe it'll be a one-year term.
Yes.
And then they will then run for re-election. For those of you sitting at home who would like to join in the fun, I encourage you to apply. It is not an easy job, but it is very rewarding. So I think that everybody can benefit from it. So yeah, hoping everybody will show up and do stuff.
Should we?
Yeah, can we just chat, about that?
Yeah, I think we should announce a date by which applications should be submitted and where they would find the application.
Yeah, we have used this policy quite a few times recently.
There is a policy on that.
I'm trying to pull that up here. I believe, I mean, we have sometimes suspended this policy, but I think that the policy says immediately we will advertise it through our regular channels. And probably Kat Norton, the secretary to the board, knows this best of all. I assume working with Ed Rich to push it out through communications channels. And there is, I believe, a pretty standardized form that we've used the past few times.
In front of you, there should be a paper copy of what our current process has been. This is my cheat sheet, but also a copy of the last used expired term application. So if you'd like to look at that and let me know if you need any adjustments for this time, I would appreciate that. And if the board can determine the date that they'd like this application to open and the length of time they'd like to have it open, that would also be beneficial for us.
Was 2 weeks, like how many, do you remember how many applicants we had in those 2 weeks the last time? I think it was just like 3 or 4, right?
3.
It was 4.
Yeah. And,
It must be at least 2 weeks.
Right,
It could be
right.
longer.
So, I mean, I would suggest 3 weeks for it to be open. Just to give people an opportunity to sort of adjust their schedules and figure out if it's something they want to do. They might want to talk to current board members or past board members or community members about, you know, what it entails or what their expectations are.
So April 17th, is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yeah, 3 weeks I think is good, because there's also, you know, do the application.
Right. So if we voted on a 3-week time period, how soon can the notice go out? Like, can it go out this week or?
Would you like to adjust the application at all, or do you like it the way it is?
I thought it was fine.
As one who filled it out, I would only say, you know, all the questions are mandatory. You even have here, like, the stars, they're indicating that. And I don't remember now which one, but I remember thinking a couple of them, I didn't really know what to say exactly, or whether I needed to put something. And also, I was a little concerned, I would be concerned about asking for a home phone number and a cell phone number. I know maybe some people might hesitate to give out their cell phone. Maybe we could just ask for,
A way to contact.
what's your preferred way to contact or something. So it might just be taking the home phone, cell phone question and just say and the personal email address, and just asking which, because now I'm remembering why, because in the application, it does say information will become public. And I remember thinking I didn't want my cell phone number to be public.
As board members, that information is public. But I think that we have to.
Once you're on the board, sure, but as an applicant, that's.
I do think we also want a way to verify that the person is a resident in the community.
Oh, sure, but isn't there an address question? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you asked to remove the address.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I meant the phone number. Yeah, the phone, cell phone, and personal email. Maybe we could just say, what's a preferred way to contact you? Does that make sense? That would be my recommendation as an applicant, and maybe my concern really is just around the cell phone number and the email.
If I may request that we keep a phone number and an email contact because it is sometimes challenging to connect with folks.
Sure. That makes sense. Maybe just remove cell phone.
We can actually redact that information from the agenda so that until they're actually.
It's not what it said, but I understand, yeah. If you can redact it, sure. Maybe just have it be preferred phone number or something like that. And as long as people realize it's gonna be posted.
I think we can make these changes very quickly and working with Ed Rich to get it out the door. Potentially, I would say absolutely by Monday at the latest.
Okay. Sounds good to me. All right, so then Monday for posting, and then 3 weeks from Monday for the closure of applications. Whatever date that is. I'm not sure.
21st, April 21st,
Okay,
day
so
after
April
Easter.
21st. So do we need a motion for that?
No.
Okay, even better.
Unless there's discussion.
I think we're all good. We all good?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about timing, when our next meeting is, and then it would be nice, it's 4/17, to have the person, if possible, before we do our norms and protocols
Yeah.
session. So I just want to put that out there.
So do you want to do it for 2 weeks then, and
No,
just see what
I
happens?
mean, it doesn't, I just want to throw that out there.
No,
So
I
we
mean,
may
that's- yeah, it's a good
Fit that in
consideration.
somewhere in, in between, or
Yeah.
Or the norms and protocols could be shifted
a little to later in the month.
a little
Yeah.
later.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're all good on that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to action items. Oy, okay. So, yeah, all right. Distinguished awards, Advocate of the Year. You know what?
So we need to make a motion to start putting names out.
I move to nominate Tina Franklin as MRH Advocate of the Year.
I will second that.
Does anybody want to nominate anybody else?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Bethany Noby as Advocate of the Year.
Second.
All right, now we vote. All in favor of Ms. Frankel? No? What?
Yeah.
I know, it's
Okay, so all in favor of Tina Franklin? Is that what you just said?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes?
Some hands, please, just for the minutes.
Okay, so 2, all right.
I just want to look
Yeah,
for
yeah,
information. I'm sorry, because we didn't.
Yeah, it's tough between the two good people, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was seen, because I know this is the one that's focused on student interaction, and I think,
Would you like a coin?
no, I think they're both equally, but I think
Yeah.
hers was more focused on, like, teacher thing, and so that's why I was thinking this.
So is that supposed to be more student-centric? Is that really? Well, yeah, inspiring and preparing students as leader scholars. Yeah, okay.
I mean, again, vote
Yeah.
how, you can vote however you want to vote.
There are no wrong answers.
So is that, do we need a minute still?
Can we vote now? Okay, all right, so all in favor of Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, well, 1, 2, so, Citizen of the Year. Yeah, I'll need to do that today, because I think that's the one yeah, it's the fun.
Somebody else has to make the motion.
All right, hold on one second.
I would like to nominate Mindy McBride for this one. I was really, I really liked that Fellowship Fridays thing. It seemed pretty cool.
And this is for advocate of.
No, Citizen of the Year, I think.
Oh,
Sorry.
wait, citizen?
Citizen.
If we're doing citizen, that's,
Second,
Sorry, citizen.
oh, Spirit of the, oh, I'm sorry.
They're not in the, they're not in the same order.
They're in the different.
It threw me off. All right.
Yeah.
I did have one. I would like to nominate Faye and
Oh, did I? I'm sorry, I thought it was.
No,
they're
it's,
in a different
you're
order than
right,
the
it's
sheet.
just,
Yeah.
in the sheet, it's different.
Second. Dave.
Jenny, can you repeat the nomination? I'm
It's-
sorry, Faye and Springborn
Yeah.
Citizen of the Year.
for Citizen.
Did we have a second?
So I seconded it.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
I'd like to nominate, C.
Okay, second. All right, so you got two. Are we ready to vote?
Who is yours, Linda? I'm sorry.
Miss Seeley?
Miss Seeley, okay.
Shekinah Seeley.
Okay. So, all in favor of Ms. Springborn? Okay, looks like that's going through. All right.
Family is next.
Okay. All right, Family of the Year.
I nominate the Richardson family.
Second.
Any other nomination? No? All right, so we're gonna vote. I'm gonna abstain or recuse myself, and vote. So, all in favor? All right, there you go. Congratulations, Sandy. And,
Spirit is
yes,
next.
Spirit of MRH, which apparently is.
I will refresh my nomination.
Okay.
can you restate?
It was, Mindy McBride.
Mindy McBride, okay.
I nominate Mindy McBride.
Okay, second.
I'll nominate Mary Hartnett, Dr. Hartnett.
Okay. Any other, well, someone has a second. No?
I nominate Dr. Dietrich.
Second?
Okay, so any others before we vote? All right, all in favor of Mindy McBride? Oh, all right, four. Well, I do want to do this. That's what I always intended. All right. Okay, all right, and then, is that it? No, just take, yeah, and then I thought we were gonna carve out, community partner.
Yeah.
Who wants to nominate a community partner of the year?
The,
The citizens, I think.
Yeah, the Citizen Credit Union.
I second.
A community event, we got it all wrong.
Community
Credit Union.
So Linda made the first and Brian made the second.
All right, any other nominations? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Is there any other category that y'all want to propose for anything? Like, yeah, head of the year, whatever, plant of the year? No? Okay, great.
We have other things to add to action items too, let's
I
not
know,
forget.
I know.
How lucky we are, though, that we have so many.
We have
Yes.
great,
It's hard to
great
choose.
people in the district, yeah.
Okay. Shoot. Okay,
Number 5, board policy.
thank you. Board policy batch, 2024D.
Motion to approve board policy batch 2024D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, motion passes. Board policy batch 2024, wait,
Yep.
D modifications.
So when it's okay. When the first two were submitted, we had some modifications based on feedback from the committee. So those are included and were included in the board section. So we changed the appeals process for IGCD for virtual courses to include our assistant superintendent. So that one was as modified, and the other was policy IGCDA, which was also full-time MOCAP virtual courses, which added a piece around access to district facilities, meaning that those students would not have access to district facilities. So those are the modifications for those two.
Motion to approve board policy batch 2024D modifications.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, great.
I move to approve the resignation of Board Director Christy Martinez.
Second.
I just want to thank Christy for her service, and it was a pleasure getting to know her these past 2 years.
Aye. Agreed. Thank you, Christy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Construction advisee selection.
Motion to approve the construction advisee selection.
Second.
I want to clarify, so Dr. Dietrich, we do not incur any funds on this unless and until the bond passes. Okay, thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next, we have St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative.
Motion to approve the St. Louis Research Practice Collaborative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Then, fiscal year 2026 support staff salary schedule.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 26 support staff salary schedule.
Second.
Any more discussion on this? We're good? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? No? All right, great. All right, and then we've got those that we pulled out of.
Those are the ones we just,
She added them while we were in there.
we just did those.
Oh, yeah. So, I was shocked, like Josh, because, my life been crazy lately, and I realized that today's my last day on the board, and kind of got emotional. But, it's, we had our ups and downs, our trials. I think after our retreat, we all came to realization that we all had a small part to play in a lot, and it was like a reality check for all of us. And moving forward as a board, as Katie said, I am a proud alumni of Maplewood. I'm a diehard Blue Devil. Yes. And I want us to continue on that pathway of being MRH strong, and have the support of our residents to support us, and that in the community that we are one. We might have our differences, we might have our disagreement, but So the work is hard, but I know you guys can do it. And I know you got this. And I think that retreat is what we all needed as a reality check. So thank you for your hard work, your dedication, the questions, the reassurance. The new board members, thank you. I appreciate it so much, and I know you guys are gonna be amazing moving forward. I'm still gonna be around. I'll still be around.
Sign up for some committees.
You gotta make the last motion here.
Oh, here, I gotta pull up if you just want to read it. There, I got
Let me
it.
see, okay. Move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, 13, and section 610.022 of the revised status of Missouri on March 27, 2025 for the following specific reasons: legal matters, personal matters.
Second.
Can you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Colbert?
Aye.
Mr. Max?
Yes.